They didn't build these walls to keep people safe. They built them to make sure no one ever left. Behind streets that once held cafes, schools, and children playing in doorways, an entire population was sealed inside and slowly erased. Food was measured in crumbs, space was measured in inches, and time was measured in who would still be alive by morning. These are not camps in the beginning. These are cities. Living, breathing cities turned into waiting rooms for death. Every brick, every fence, every sealed gate was part of a system designed to drain hope before taking life. People woke up each day, not asking how to live, but how long they could endure. Parents memorized the sound of boots on cobblestone. Children learned to disappear in the shadows. Bodies lay in the streets because burying the dead required more strength than the living still had. And the world outside kept moving, just meters away, as if nothing was happening. This is the story of places where escape was impossible, where survival itself became an act of resistance, and where entire cities were transformed into cemeteries without graves. Once you step inside these walls, there's no way to look away. Chapter 1. The Idea of Containment. Nazi Racial Policy Before the Ghettos. The street looks ordinary at first. Shop windows line the road. Signs hang above doorways. The smell of bread still lingers faintly in the air. But something is wrong. The glass is smeared with white paint, crude letters scratched across it. Do not buy from Jews. A man pauses, reads the words, then keeps walking. No shouting, no violence, just silence. That silence is the warning. This is how it begins. Not with walls, not with barbed wire, but with permission. Permission to look away. Long before the ghettos were sealed, the ground beneath Europe had already been prepared. The idea did not arrive suddenly. It was planted, watered, and repeated until it felt inevitable. Nazi racial ideology did not begin as a plan for mass death. It began as a story told again and again, in newspapers, classrooms, speeches, and street corners, insisting that Germany's suffering had a face, a name, a neighbor. Jews were described not as people, but as infection, as parasites, as a threat hiding in plain sight. When fear is repeated often enough, it stops sounding like hate and starts sounding like truth. By the time Adolf Hitler rose to power, anti-Semitism was no longer whispered. It was shouted from podiums and printed on posters. The air itself seemed to vibrate with accusation. Jews were blamed for Germany's defeat in the First World War, for inflation, for unemployment, for moral decay. Every hardship was folded neatly into a single lie. The effect was gradual, but relentless. People did not wake up one morning prepared to accept segregation. They were trained to accept it, step by step, law by law, silence by silence. The first blows were economic. Jewish businesses were marked, boycotted, surrounded by men in uniform who stood with arms crossed, daring customers to enter. The sound of boots on pavement became a warning bell. Inside those shops, owners waited, listening to footsteps pass by without stopping, the cash registers silent for hours. The humiliation was public. The message was clear. You are visible. You are alone. You are no longer protected. Then came the laws, wrapped in a language of order and legality. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws stripped Jews of German citizenship. The paper itself was clean, official, stamped and signed. But the effect was devastating. Overnight, millions became foreigners in the country of their birth. Marriages were outlawed. Relationships criminalized. Blood was measured, ancestry dissected, grandparents counted like evidence in a trial. Identity was no longer personal. It was assigned, reduced, weaponized. Daily life tightened like a vice. Jews were barred from professions. Doctors lost patients. Lawyers lost licenses. Teachers were dismissed from classrooms they had served for decades. Parks became forbidden. Benches marked. Swimming pools closed to certain bodies. Even the simplest pleasures were denied, one by one, until existence itself felt conditional. The smell of fresh grass in a public park. The laughter at a cafe table. All gone. replaced by signs that reminded you, at every turn, that you did not belong. Forced identification followed. Yellow stars stitched onto coats. Visible, unavoidable. The fabric scratched against skin, a constant reminder that anonymity was gone. Children asked their parents why strangers stared. Adults learned to walk faster, eyes down, shoulders tense. The stars were not only meant to identify, they were meant to isolate, to make cruelty easier, to make indifference acceptable. Still, there were no ghettos yet. No sealed districts. No walls. And that mattered, because each step forward depended on the step before it. By the time physical confinement was introduced, the idea of separation had already been normalized. People had been sorted in the mind long before they were sorted in space. The invasion of Poland in 1939 changed everything. War brought chaos, and chaos brought opportunity. Millions of Jews now fell under German control almost overnight. Cities like Warsaw, Lodz, and Krakow suddenly contained populations the Nazi regime had never expected to manage. The old methods of exclusion were no longer enough. Something more drastic was needed. Something visible. Something permanent. German administrators debated what to do. Deportation schemes were discussed. Expulsion plans drafted and discarded. But one idea kept resurfacing, simple and brutal. Concentrate the Jews. Contain them. Remove them from the rest of society, not by erasing them yet, but by storing them, holding them, compressing them into spaces so tight that survival itself would become a daily struggle. Containment was framed as necessity, as order, as public safety. Officials spoke of disease prevention, of security, of wartime efficiency. But beneath the language was intent. Ghettos would make Jews easier to control, easier to exploit, easier to starve, easier to kill later when the time came. The first forced relocations began quietly. Families were ordered to leave their homes with hours' notice. What they could carry determined what they would keep of their lives. Furniture was abandoned. Photographs left behind. Keys tucked into pockets in the foolish hope of return. Trucks rolled through streets, engines idling, soldiers shouting instructions. The smell of exhaust mixed with fear. Doors slammed. Footsteps echoed. Cities shifted as if a hidden earthquake were moving people from one side to another. Jewish neighborhoods were chosen not by accident, but by design. Older districts, poorer areas, places already crowded. Walls were erected where streets once flowed freely. Barbed wire stretched across intersections. Guard posts appeared overnight. One day you could cross the street. The next day, a rifle blocked your path. The transformation was so sudden it felt unreal. Familiar streets became foreign. Home became a trap. For those inside, the sense of time warped. Days were filled with confusion and rumors. Would this be temporary? Would work permits save families? Would obedience protect children? No one knew. The uncertainty was suffocating. The air inside the sealed areas grew heavier with each passing week, thick with hunger, sweat, smoke, and fear. Outside, trams continued to run. Cafes stayed open. Life went on, just beyond the walls. The genius of the ghetto system, if it can be called that, was its cruelty disguised as administration. Jews were forced to govern themselves under German command. Councils were established, given impossible tasks with deadly consequences. Collect food that did not exist. Provide labor quotas under threat of punishment. Compile lists. Always lists. Names written in ink that felt heavier than blood. At this stage, mass extermination had not yet been openly declared, but death was already present. Starvation was policy, not accident. Rations were calculated to weaken, not sustain. Disease spread easily in overcrowded rooms where families slept in shifts. The sound of coughing echoed through thin walls. The smell of waste lingered in courtyards. Bodies began to appear in streets, wrapped in blankets, waiting for removal. The city itself seemed to be decaying from the inside out. What made the ghettos possible was not just ideology, but distance. Distance between those inside and those outside. Distance created by law, by fear, by convenience. Once Jews were sealed away, their suffering became abstract, out of sight, easier to ignore. The walls did not only imprison bodies, they imprisoned empathy. By the time the ghettos were fully established, the world had already accepted the premise. Jews were separated, identified, confined. All that remained was to decide what to do with them next. The machinery was in place. The population was concentrated. The experiment in containment was complete. And somewhere, beyond the walls, plans were already being drawn for the next phase. Trains would be needed, schedules prepared, destinations chosen. The ghettos were never meant to be the end. They were the waiting room. As night falls over these sealed cities, guards take their posts. Lights flicker in overcrowded rooms. A child presses their face against a cracked window, staring at a street they are no longer allowed to walk. They do not know it yet, but the walls around them are only the beginning. The question is no longer whether they will be allowed to leave. It is when the walls themselves will open and what will be waiting on the other side. Chapter 2: Invasion and Confinement. The birth of the ghettos. The sound comes first. A deep, mechanical roar rolling across the horizon, growing louder with every second. Tanks grinding over dirt roads. Trucks rattling through villages at dawn. Boots striking pavement in perfect rhythm. In September of 1939, Poland wakes to invasion. Windows tremble. Dogs bark. Church bells fall silent. Within days, the country collapses under a speed and violence few believe possible. 4 Jewish communities scattered across cities and towns. The danger is immediate, but still undefined. No one yet knows what shape this terror will take, only that it has arrived, and it is not leaving. German forces pour into Poland with lists already prepared. Census records, property maps, community registries. This is not chaos. It is choreography. Soldiers move street by street, building by building, posting notices in multiple languages. Curfews are imposed. Radios confiscated. Synagogues vandalized or burned. The smell of smoke drifting through neighborhoods that have stood for centuries. Rabbis are beaten in public squares. Beards are cut with bayonets while crowds are forced to watch. The message is unmistakable. Authority has changed hands, and mercy will not be part of the new order. At first, the violence feels sporadic, unpredictable. A shop smashed here, a family dragged from their home there. But quickly, a pattern emerges. Jews are singled out, humiliated, and concentrated. Not yet behind walls, but pushed closer together by force and fear. Entire streets are declared off-limits. Jewish residents are ordered to relocate, often overnight. The instructions are vague. Bring only essentials. Leave keys behind. Failure to comply means arrest, or worse. People pack what they can carry. Bedding, pots, a few photographs. The rest of their lives remain behind in apartments that will soon belong to someone else. Cities swell and contract at the same time. Jewish neighborhoods overflow as families arrive from surrounding towns, driven in by German decrees. Trains arrive loaded with people who have been stripped of homes they never thought they would lose. Platforms echo with crying children and shouted orders. The smell of coal smoke mixes with sweat and fear. Inside the cars, there's no space to sit. Outside, there's nowhere to go. This forced movement is not random. It is deliberate compression, squeezing people into smaller and smaller spaces until something breaks. German administrators face a problem of their own making. Millions of Jews are now under occupation. Deportation beyond Europe is discussed, even fantasized about, but war makes such plans impractical. Instead, temporary solutions are proposed. Holding zones, residential districts, isolated areas within cities. The language remains bureaucratic, almost sterile. Jewish quarters, restricted zones, special residential areas. But behind the paperwork is a harsher reality. These areas will be sealed, guarded, controlled, and those inside will be entirely dependent on their captors for survival. The first ghettos are improvised. A few streets blocked off with wooden barriers. Guards posted at intersections. Residents told they may leave only with permits that are rarely granted. Over time, these temporary measures harden into permanence. Brick walls replace fences. Barbed wire snakes across alleyways. Watchtowers rise above rooftops. The city itself is reshaped, not by accident, but by intent. Streets that once connected neighborhoods now lead nowhere. Gates swing shut with a finality that echoes long after the metal clang fades. Inside, overcrowding becomes immediate and overwhelming. Apartments designed for one family now hold 5, sometimes 10. Hallways become sleeping spaces. Stairwells turn into kitchens. Privacy disappears. The air grows thick with breath and desperation. Water is scarce. Sanitation collapses. The sounds of life intensify. Coughing through thin walls. Arguments over bread. Babies crying through the night. Hunger arrives quickly, settling into bodies like a second skin. German orders continue to arrive, each one tightening the vice. Jews are forbidden from using public transportation. Forbidden from leaving the ghetto after certain hours. Forbidden from owning radios. Food rations are set far below survival levels. Smuggling becomes essential, and therefore punishable by death. Children crawl through holes in walls, slipping past guard with sacks of potatoes strapped to their backs, hearts pounding at the sound of every footstep. Some make it back, some do not. The ghettos are presented to the outside world as a solution, as a way to maintain order during wartime, as a protective measure against disease. Posters warn non-Jews of supposed health risks beyond the walls. Lies stack upon lies, each one easier to accept than the truth. For those outside, the walls offer distance, a way not to see. For those inside, they offer only enclosure, a slow suffocation disguised as administration. Jewish councils are established under German command, tasked with enforcing orders inside the ghettos. The weight placed on these councils is crushing. They must distribute food that does not exist, assign labor quotas that tear families apart, compile lists of names, never knowing which list will be used for punishment. Refusal means execution. Compliance means complicity. Every decision carries the echo of lives that will be lost no matter what choice is made. Despite everything, life does not stop. It fractures, bends, adapts. Schools operate in secret. Prayers are whispered behind closed doors. Writers record what they see, burying diaries in jars beneath the floorboards, hoping someone will one day dig them up. Music drifts through cramped rooms, thin but defiant. These acts do not change the reality of confinement, but they preserve something essential. Proof that the people inside are still human, even as they are treated as less than that. The German occupation tightens its grip as the war expands. New ghettos are created across occupied territories, each one learning from the last. Boundaries become more rigid. Surveillance increases. Punishments grow harsher. Public executions are staged as warnings. Bodies are left hanging in streets, signs pinned to their chests. The smell of death becomes familiar, almost routine. People step around corpses on their way to fetch water, eyes fixed ahead, because stopping means breaking down. What begins as temporary confinement starts to feel permanent. Rumors spread, conflicting and terrifying. Some say the ghettos are work centers. Others whisper of camps far away, places no one returns from. No one knows what to believe. Information is as tightly controlled as food. Fear fills the gaps left by uncertainty, growing larger with each passing week. Outside the walls, the war continues. Front lines shift. Battles are fought. Victories announced. But inside the ghettos, time moves differently. Days blur together, measured by hunger and survival. Seasons change, fell through cracks in walls and leaking roofs. Winter brings cold that cuts through threadbare clothing. Summer brings disease that spreads faster in heat. Death does not arrive all at once. It comes daily, quietly, claiming the weakest first. German officials visit the ghettos periodically, observing conditions with clinical detachment. Reports are written, statistics compiled, mortality rates noted with interest, not concern. The suffering is not a failure of policy. It is evidence that the policy is working. The ghettos are doing exactly what they were designed to do. Weakening, degrading, preparing. As 1940 turns into 1941, the ghettos are no longer just holding areas. They are experiments. How much deprivation can a population endure? How quickly will disease spread when resources are cut off? How efficiently can labor be extracted from bodies already on the brink of collapse? These questions are answered not in laboratories, but in living cities turned into slow-motion death traps. And still the walls hold. People remain trapped between hope and despair. Hope that this suffering has an endpoint. Despair that it does not. The birth of the ghettos marks a turning point, though few inside realize it yet. The machinery of destruction is accelerating, refining itself with every decree and every death. As night falls again, guards light cigarettes at their posts. Inside the ghettos, candles flicker in overcrowded rooms. Somewhere, a train whistle sounds in the distance, long and low, cutting through the darkness. It is not stopping here. Not yet. But its presence is felt all the same. The ghettos have been created. The population has been contained. And what was once imagined as temporary is quietly becoming something far more final. Chapter 3: Walls, Barbed Wire, and Seals, Turning Cities into Prisons. The wall does not rise all at once. It appears in pieces. A stack of bricks blocking one street. A wooden barrier hammered into place at an intersection. Barbed wire stretched between lampposts where trams once passed. At first, people assume it is temporary. Another wartime measure. Another inconvenience. But day by day, the gaps close. The openings shrink. Guards take permanent positions. And then one morning, a gate slams shut with a metallic finality that echoes through the street. From that moment on, the city is no longer a city. It is a prison. In occupied Poland, German authorities move quickly to formalize what had begun as improvised containment. Orders are issued with precise language and colder intent. Jewish districts are to be sealed. Boundaries drawn. Movement restricted. Maps are redrawn, not to reflect geography, but control. Streets that once connected neighborhoods are deliberately cut off. Entire blocks are amputated from the urban body. What remains inside the perimeter is declared a separate world, governed by different rules, or rather, no rules at all. The construction of the walls becomes a daily spectacle. Jewish laborers are forced to build their own enclosure under armed guard. Hands blister as bricks are laid. Mortar dust coats lungs. The smell of wet cement mixes with sweat and fear. Some recognize the bitter irony immediately. Others refuse to believe the structure will stand for long. Surely this cannot last. Surely this is not the future. But the walls rise anyway, stone by stone, sealing hope behind them. In places like Warsaw, the scale is overwhelming. Massive sections of the city vanish behind brick and wire. Windows that once looked out onto busy streets now face blank stone. Sunlight narrows. Sound changes. The city inside the walls becomes quieter in some places, unbearably loud in others. Echoes bounce off barriers that were never meant to exist. The familiar rhythm of urban life fractures into something tense and claustrophobic. Gates are installed at key crossings, each one guarded by German soldiers, often assisted by local police. Permits are required to pass through, and permits are rarely granted. A person can see freedom just meters away, smell food cooking on the other side, hear footsteps of people who are still allowed to move freely. That proximity is deliberate. It is meant to taunt, to remind those inside exactly how close normal life remains, and how unreachable it has become. Once the seals are complete, the rules harden. Leaving the ghetto without authorization is punishable by death. Smuggling food becomes a capital crime. Anyone caught helping Jews from the outside faces execution as well. Terror is enforced not only through violence, but through example. Bodies are displayed. Notices are posted. The sound of gunshots becomes a form of communication. One mistake, and the punishment is immediate. Inside the ghettos, overcrowding reaches a breaking point. Tens of thousands are forced into districts never designed to hold such numbers. Apartments overflow. Entire families sleep sitting up because there is no room to lie down. The air becomes stale, heavy with breath, and unwashed bodies. In winter, windows are sealed to preserve heat, trapping smoke and sickness inside. In summer, the stench of waste and decay hangs over streets like a suffocating fog. Sanitation collapses under the strain. Toilets overflow. Clean water becomes scarce. Typhus begins to spread, carried by lice that thrive in crowded, filthy conditions. The sound of coughing is constant, echoing through stairwells and courtyards. Feverish bodies pile into makeshift hospitals that have no medicine, no supplies, and no real hope. Death becomes so frequent that it loses its shock. The living step carefully around the dead, because there is no longer time to stop. Food rations are calculated with chilling precision. Official allotments provide far fewer calories than the human body requires to survive. Bread is dark, coarse, often mixed with sawdust or substitutes. Soup is little more than warm water with a few floating scraps. Hunger sharpens senses and dulls morals. People argue over crumbs. Parents skip meals so children might eat, then collapse from weakness. The smell of food from outside the walls becomes a form of torture. The ghettos are not sealed by walls alone. They are sealed by bureaucracy. Endless paperwork governs every aspect of life. Registration cards, work permits, housing assignments, labor quotas. The Jewish councils are forced to administer these systems, issuing orders they know will cause suffering. Every decision is made under threat. Failure to comply means collective punishment. Entire buildings are fined, beaten, or deported because of one infraction. German officials monitor conditions closely. Inspections are conducted with clipboards and cold eyes. Mortality statistics are recorded with interest. Overcrowding is noted, but never relieved. Disease is acknowledged, but never treated. Starvation is observed, but never corrected. The suffering inside the ghettos is not a problem to be solved. It is a process to be managed. Children adapt faster than adults, because they must. They become smugglers, slipping through cracks in walls, crawling through sewers, darting past guards with practiced fearlessness. Their bodies are small enough to fit through openings adults cannot use. Their punishment, if caught, is just as severe. The sound of a single shot in an alley is often followed by silence that feels heavier than screaming. At night, the ghettos take on a different character. Darkness hides hunger, but amplifies fear. Guards patrol the walls, boots crunching on gravel, rifles slung casually over shoulders. Searchlights sweep across rooftops. Inside cramped rooms, families whisper. Candles flicker. The smell of wax mixes with damp clothing and stale air. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by nightmares and the distant sound of shouting. The psychological toll is relentless. Time loses meaning. Days blur together, measured only by hunger and roll calls. Hope becomes dangerous because disappointment hurts more than despair. Some cling to rumors of resettlement, of work camps, of eventual release. Others sense that the walls are not meant to open again, that the city has been sealed not to protect those inside, but to make their disappearance easier. Cultural life persists, fragile but defiant. Secret lectures are held in basements. Music drifts through windows late at night. Writers document what they see, hiding pages beneath floorboards or burying them in courtyards. These acts are not illusions of survival. They are acts of witness, a refusal to let the walls be the final word. Outside the ghettos, normal life continues with disturbing ease. Trams pass by sealed districts. Markets operate within sight of walls. People glance briefly at the barriers, then look away. The separation feels complete. The walls do their work not only by confining bodies, but by dividing conscience. What happens inside becomes someone else's problem. As months pass, the ghettos grow more efficient at killing without bullets. Starvation weakens immune systems. Disease spreads faster. Labor demands increase even as bodies fail. Those who can no longer work are deemed useless. Lists are compiled. Names whispered. Selections occur quietly at first, then with increasing frequency. People vanish from buildings overnight, their absence noted but rarely discussed. The walls stand firm through it all. They do not crack under suffering. They do not respond to prayer. They absorb sound, shadow, and despair. They turn once living cities into sealed containers where death can be observed, measured, and planned. By now, the ghettos are fully realized systems of control. Every movement tracked, every resource restricted, every life reduced to a number on a ledger. What began as segregation has become something far more dangerous. The population is contained, isolated, dehumanized. The final barriers between intention and action are nearly gone. One evening, as dusk settles over the ghetto, smoke rises from a distant building. No one rushes to put out the fire. There is no water to spare, no strength left to fight it. People watch from windows as flames lick the sky, reflecting off brick walls that trap the heat inside. The city burns quietly, just another loss added to countless others. Beyond the walls, decisions are being made. Trains are being scheduled, destinations discussed, and offices far removed from the stench of overcrowded rooms. The ghettos have served their purpose. They have weakened their prisoners, stripped them of resources, broken them down physically and psychologically. The seals are tight now, too tight, and when they finally open again, it will not be to release those trapped inside back into the world they once knew. It will be to move them forward, deeper into a system that no longer pretends to be temporary. The walls have done their job, and the next phase is already approaching. Chapter 4: Overcrowding by Design. Starvation as Policy. The hunger does not announce itself loudly at first. It begins as a dull pressure behind the eyes, a tightening in the stomach that comes and goes. People tell themselves it will pass, that tomorrow will be better. But tomorrow brings the same emptiness, sharper now, more insistent. Soon hunger is no longer a feeling. It is a condition, a constant companion that reshapes thought, movement, and time itself. Inside the sealed ghettos, overcrowding is not an accident of war. It is deliberate. German authorities do not merely confine Jewish populations. They compress them. Every available apartment is filled beyond capacity. Families are ordered to take in strangers. Entire rooms are divided by hanging sheets to create the illusion of privacy. Stairwells, basements, attics, any space that can hold a human body is claimed. What was once a neighborhood becomes a mass of breathing bodies stacked on top of one another, each one struggling for air, warmth, and space. The numbers are staggering. In some ghettos, more than 100,000 people are forced into areas designed for a fraction of that population. Streets narrow as carts, bodies, and debris crowd together. Courtyards once meant for light and movement become dumping grounds for waste and the sick. Windows are blocked to conserve heat, cutting off fresh air. The smell inside the ghettos changes. It becomes heavy, sour, impossible to escape. A mixture of unwashed bodies, rotting food scraps, sewage, smoke, and sickness. It seeps into clothing, into hair, into memory. Food enters the ghettos in carefully controlled amounts. Official rations are announced, calculated down to the gram. On paper, they appear technical, even reasonable. In reality, they are lethal. The daily allotment is far below what a human body requires to survive. Bread becomes the central currency of life. Dark, dense loaves stretch thin across families, sliced into ever smaller pieces. Soup kitchens distribute watery mixtures that barely qualify as nourishment. People line up for hours in the cold, bowls in hand, knowing the portion will not satisfy them, but unable to walk away. Hunger changes behavior quickly. Conversations revolve around food. Memories of meals from the past are replayed obsessively. People describe flavors in vivid detail, as if tasting them again might ease the ache. Parents lie to children, telling them they have already eaten. Children learn to ignore their own hunger, or to cry quietly so as not to draw attention. Arguments break out over crumbs. Theft increases, not out of malice, but necessity. Morality bends under the weight of starvation. German policy ensures that hunger is not merely present, but permanent. Food deliveries are inconsistent and often reduced without explanation. Punitive measures are imposed on entire buildings or streets if a single person is accused of smuggling. Rations are cut as punishment, turning hunger into a collective weapon. Starvation becomes a form of discipline. Obedience is enforced not through persuasion, but through empty stomachs. Overcrowding accelerates disease. Typhus spreads rapidly, carried by lice that thrive in filthy, cramped conditions. Fevers rage through buildings, leaving bodies drenched in sweat, shivering uncontrollably. There is little medicine. Doctors work with bare hands and fading hope. Hospitals overflow, corridors lined with the sick and dying. The sound of coughing becomes constant, a grim soundtrack to daily life. When one person falls ill, dozens follow. The dead accumulate faster than they can be buried. At first, bodies are wrapped carefully, carried out by relatives with dignity and prayer. Over time, there are too many. Corpses are left in stairwells, in courtyards, in the streets. Children step around them on their way to fetch water. The living avert their eyes, not out of indifference, but exhaustion. Grief requires energy, and energy is in short supply. German administrators observe these conditions with detachment. Reports are written. Mortality rates calculated. Charts drawn. The data confirms what policy intended. People are dying in large numbers without the need for bullets. Hunger and disease are doing the work quietly, efficiently. The ghettos are functioning exactly as designed. Overcrowding also destroys privacy, and with it, dignity. There is no place to be alone. No space to grieve in silence. Couples cannot speak freely. Parents cannot shield children from despair. Every emotion is exposed, shared, magnified. Tensions rise. Fights break out over space, over noise, over nothing at all. The pressure never releases. It only builds. Children are particularly vulnerable. Their bodies shrink quickly, limbs thinning, faces hollowing out. Growth stops. Energy fades. Yet they are often the ones sent out to smuggle food, because they are small enough to slip through gaps in walls or fences. They return with potatoes hidden under coats, hearts racing. Some are caught. Punishment is swift and public. The message is clear. Survival itself is a crime. Work is demanded even as bodies weaken. Labor quotas are enforced. Workshops operate inside the ghettos, producing goods for the German war effort. People work long hours for meager pay that cannot buy enough food to sustain them. Those who collapse are replaced. Those who can no longer work are marked as expendable. Hunger becomes a sorting mechanism, separating the temporarily useful from the permanently disposable. The psychological effects of starvation are profound. Concentration fades. Memory blurs. Emotions flatten or explode unpredictably. Hope becomes dangerous because it consumes energy. Some withdraw entirely, lying still for hours, conserving strength. Others become frantic, obsessed with finding food at any cost. Suicide rates rise, though many are too weak even for that. Death arrives quietly, often during sleep, the body simply giving up. And still, people adapt. They invent recipes from nothing. Soup made from potato peels. Bread stretched with sawdust. Coffee brewed from burnt grain. These inventions are acts of desperation, but also ingenuity. Proof that the will to live persists even when survival is systematically undermined. The outside world remains painfully close. Smells of cooking drift over the walls. Music can sometimes be heard from nearby cafes. Trams rattle past, full of people going about ordinary lives. This proximity sharpens the cruelty. The contrast between abundance and deprivation is impossible to ignore. It is not just hunger that kills. It is the knowledge that hunger is being enforced, intentionally, within sight of plenty. Over time, the ghettos develop a rhythm dictated by starvation. Morning lines at soup kitchens. Afternoon searches for work or scraps. Evening exhaustion. Nightmares filled with food and loss. The seasons mark changes in suffering. Winter brings cold that penetrates weakened bodies. Summer brings disease that spreads faster in heat. There is no relief, only variation. German policy continues to refine itself. Overcrowding increases as more Jews are forced into existing ghettos from surrounding areas. Space shrinks further. Rations are reduced again. Death rates climb. The ghettos become places where life expectancy can be measured in months, sometimes weeks. Yet no announcement is made. No acknowledgement. The suffering is allowed to continue without comment. Jewish councils are forced to manage the impossible, distribute food that cannot meet needs, assign housing when no space remains, decide who works and who does not, knowing those decisions carry deadly consequences. They are blamed by those inside the ghettos for their powerlessness, and by German authorities for any failure. They are trapped between responsibility and terror, starvation and execution. Despite everything, moments of humanity persist. A shared piece of bread. A lullaby sung softly to a child too weak to cry. A joke whispered in line to break the silence. These moments do not change the outcome, but they matter. They are proof that the policy of starvation has not completely erased compassion. As months pass, the effects of overcrowding and hunger become irreversible. Bodies waste away. Immune systems collapse. Resistance becomes physically impossible for many. The ghettos are no longer just places of confinement. They are mechanisms of attrition, grinding people down until little remains. German authorities take note. The ghettos have succeeded in weakening their populations. Hunger has done what violence alone could not. It has reduced people to shadows, made them easier to control, easier to move, easier to kill. The next phase will require transport, labor, efficiency, and the ghettos have prepared the way. One evening, a man collapses in the street, his body simply shutting down. No one rushes to help, not because they do not care, but because they cannot. There is no strength left to spare. The man lies still as darkness falls, another silent casualty of a policy designed to kill without drawing attention. As night settles over the ghetto, the walls stand unchanged. Inside them, hunger tightens its grip. Outside, decisions are being made by people who will never feel this emptiness, never smell this air, never hear the quiet sobbing of children in overcrowded rooms. The ghettos have become engines of slow death, and those engines are now running at full speed, carrying everyone inside toward a future that grows darker with every passing day. Chapter 5. Daily Life in a Dying World. Morning inside the ghetto does not arrive with light. It arrives with sound, coughing that rattles through thin walls. The scrape of a chair pulled across a bare floor. A child crying weakly, the kind of cry that has already learned not to expect an answer. Dawn seeps through cracks between buildings, pale and reluctant, illuminating rooms packed with bodies that have barely slept. There is no moment of rest between nights and days here. Survival does not pause. People wake already exhausted. Hunger never leaves during sleep. It tightens, sharpens, waits. Stomachs cramp as bodies unfold from cramped positions on floors, benches, stair landings. There are no beds for most, only borrowed corners. The air is thick and stale, heavy with the smell of sweat, sickness, smoke, and unwashed clothing. Windows remain shut, even when weather allows them to open, because warmth is precious and drafts mean death in winter. Breathing feels like work. The first task of the day is food, always food. Not eating, but finding it, acquiring it, stretching it. People check pockets for ration cards, though they already know what they will receive. The numbers are memorized. A piece of bread barely larger than a hand. Soup that tastes of water and rust. Sometimes nothing at all. Still, they line up. Lines form before sunrise, winding through courtyards and streets, silent at first, then restless as hours pass. Feet shuffle. People lean against walls to stay upright. When the soup finally comes, it is lukewarm, ladled quickly, gone in seconds. The hunger remains. After food comes movement. Those strong enough search for work. Workshops inside the ghetto hum with forced productivity. Sewing uniforms. Repairing boots. Sorting scrap. The labor is constant, punishing, poorly paid. Fingers bleed. Eyes strain in dim light. The sound of machines mixes with coughing and whispered conversations. Work permits are lifelines, not because they offer dignity, but because they offer a chance, however small, of extra food. Those without work watch with envy and fear. Being idle is dangerous. Uselessness can be fatal. Children move differently through the ghetto. They slip between bodies, duck through doorways, dart across courtyards with practice speed. Many no longer attend school openly, but learning continues in whispers and fragments. A lesson scribbled on scrap paper, a prayer recited from memory. Older children take on adult roles, caring for siblings, scavenging for scraps, smuggling food when possible. Childhood dissolves under the pressure of necessity. Games disappear. Play becomes strategy. The streets tell their own story. Pavement cracked and uneven, littered with refuse and sometimes bodies. Carts rattle past, pulled by people too weak to be animals. A man collapses against a wall, slides slowly to the ground. No one stops, not because they do not care, but because stopping means risking their own survival. Compassion exists here, but it is rationed as carefully as food. Disease spreads silently and relentlessly. Typhus, tuberculosis, dysentery. Illness thrives in overcrowded rooms and filthy conditions. Doctors work with almost nothing. No medicine, no equipment. They diagnose with touch and intuition, knowing that diagnosis does not guarantee treatment. Hospitals overflow. Beds are shared by multiple patients, sometimes alive and dead together. The smell inside these rooms is unforgettable, a mix of sweat, sickness, and despair. Death becomes part of daily routine. Bodies are collected in the morning, sometimes loaded onto carts, sometimes left where they fall until someone has the strength to move them. Burial practices degrade under pressure. Graves are shallow, ceremonies brief or non-existent. Mourning becomes internal, silent, because there is no space or energy to grieve properly. Loss piles on loss until individual deaths blur together into a constant absence. Despite everything, social structures persist. Families cling to one another. Neighbors form fragile alliances. Information circulates in whispers. Who has extra bread? Which guard can be bribed? Which street is safest today? Rumors travel faster than truth. Stories of camps, of resettlement, of liberation. No one knows what to believe. Hope becomes a dangerous currency, traded cautiously. Smuggling is lifeblood. Without it, the ghettos would empty faster than they already do. Food enters hidden in sacks, sewn into clothing, passed through holes in walls, slipped beneath fences. Children are often the smugglers, their small bodies better suited for the task. Each trip is a gamble. If caught, punishment is immediate and brutal. Yet they go anyway, because hunger leaves no alternatives. The presence of guards is constant. Rifles slung casually, eyes scanning, whistles sharp and sudden. The sound of boots approaching can freeze a street. People press themselves into doorways, lower their gaze, hold their breath. Random searches occur without warning. Homes are entered, belongings overturned, hidden food confiscated. Sometimes people are taken, dragged away without explanation. Their absence lingers longer than their presence ever did. Inside overcrowded apartments, life compresses further. Privacy vanishes. Conversations happen in fragments, interrupted by noise and movement. Arguments flare easily. Tension is everywhere, brittle and dangerous. Yet moments of tenderness still appear. A mother brushing a child's hair. A shared joke whispered late at night. A song hummed softly, almost inaudible. These moments are fragile, fleeting, but they matter. Cultural life continues underground. Writers document daily events, not for publication, but for survival of memory. They write in notebooks, on scraps of paper, on the backs of forms. Some bury their words in jars beneath buildings, hoping someone will one day find them. Musicians play when they can, instruments battered but voices strong. Art becomes a form of resistance, not against guards, but against erasure. Religion adapts as well. Services are held in secret, prayers whispered instead of sung. Faith offers comfort to some, anger to others. Questions go unanswered. Why this suffering? Why this silence? Why now? There are no explanations that satisfy hunger or grief. Still, belief persists, reshaped by desperation. Time behaves strangely in the ghetto. Days feel endless, yet weeks vanish without memory. Seasons mark changes in suffering rather than relief. Winter brings cold that seeps into bones already weakened by hunger. Summer brings heat that reminds sickness faster. Rain turns streets into mud. Snow hides bodies until spring reveals them again. Nature continues, indifferent. Outside the walls, life goes on. People commute. Markets operate. Children attend school. The contrast is unbearable. Sounds drift over the walls. Laughter, music, the clatter of dishes. These sounds remind those inside of what has been taken and how close it remains. The walls do not block sound. They only block escape. Psychological collapse is common. Some withdraw entirely, lying still for hours, conserving energy, fading quietly. Others lash out, driven by fear and frustration. Suicide becomes an unspoken reality. Some choose the manner of their death rather than waiting. Others simply stop eating, surrendering slowly. Death takes many forms here, not all of them violent. German authorities observe all of this without intervention. Reports continue. Statistics accumulate. Mortality rises. No alarms are raised. The suffering is not a failure of policy. It is confirmation. The ghettos are functioning as intended. They weaken populations. They break resistance. They prepare people for what comes next. As months pass, daily life becomes narrower. Choices disappear. Options vanish. Survival is reduced to basic instincts. Eat if possible. Rest if allowed. Avoid attention. Stay alive one more day. Long-term thinking becomes impossible. The future shrinks to the next hour, the next meal, the next breath. And yet, people still plan. They plan to survive. To escape if the chance arises. To protect children. To preserve dignity. These plans rarely succeed, but their existence matters. They are proof that even in a dying world, the human mind resists surrender. One evening, as darkness settles, a family shares a final crust of bread. They divide it carefully, evenly, though no portion is enough. They eat slowly, savoring each bite, aware that tomorrow offers no guarantee. Outside, a guard laughs with a companion. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle sounds, long and low, passing by without stopping. Inside the ghetto, another day ends much as it began, with hunger and exhaustion. Daily life continues, not because it is sustainable, but because there is no alternative. The city still breathes, barely, inside walls that tighten with each passing week. And beneath the routines of survival, a darker truth is taking shape. This existence was never meant to endure. It was meant to prepare. Chapter 6. The Judenrate. Impossible choices under terror. The summons arrives without warning. A knock at the door, sharp and final. A name called from the street. A list posted on a wall. Men are ordered to report to an office they did not choose, for a role no one would ever volunteer for. Refusal is not an option. Those selected understand immediately that whatever this is, it will not end well. Yet they go, because not going would mean death, and going at least offers the illusion of agency. This is how the Judenrate are born, not through ambition or authority, but through coercion wrapped in formality. German administrators announced the creation of Jewish councils as a matter of order. Every ghetto will have one. Every council will be responsible for internal administration, food distribution, housing assignments, labor quotas, sanitation, compliance with German decrees. The language is deceptively neutral, almost mundane. But behind it lies a brutal truth. The councils are designed to stand between the occupier and the occupied, absorbing blame, enforcing impossible orders, and breaking the social fabric from within. The men appointed to these councils are often respected figures before the war. Community leaders, lawyers, teachers, business owners, rabbis, people accustomed to responsibility, to problem solving, to negotiation. German officials choose them precisely for these traits. They believe these men will cooperate, that they will try to manage chaos, that they will cling to the hope that compliance might save lives. That hope is the trap. From the first day, the demands are contradictory and deadly. Provide lists of workers, but do not let unemployment rise. Distribute food fairly, but do so with rations that guarantee starvation. Maintain order, but without police or authority of your own. Deliver quotas on time, or face collective punishment. Every failure is punished. Every success only leads to more demands. There is no winning condition. There is only delay. The councils work from overcrowded offices, papers stacked high, air thick with sweat and fear. People line the hallways begging for help. Mothers plead for extra bread. Fathers ask for work permits. Elderly men ask for medicine that does not exist. The council members listen, knowing they cannot meet these requests. Each refusal cuts deeper than any insult. They become the visible face of decisions made far beyond their control. German officials enforce authority through terror. Council members are beaten during meetings, threatened openly, executed as examples when orders are not met. Sometimes entire councils are shot and replaced overnight. The message is unmistakable. You serve at our pleasure. Your life lasts only as long as your usefulness. This knowledge hangs over every decision like a blade. One of the most crushing responsibilities is the compilation of lists. Names, ages, occupations, addresses. At first, these lists are for labor assignments, then for housing reallocations, later for deportations. Council members are told the lists are necessary, that those selected are being sent to work. That cooperation will spare the rest. No proof is offered, no guarantees given. The men holding the pens know that writing a name may be signing a death sentence, but refusing to write guarantees immediate execution and replacement by someone else. Inside the ghettos, resentment grows. People see council members receiving slightly better rations or living in less crowded apartments. They see them meeting with German officials. They hear rumors of favoritism, corruption, betrayal. Sometimes these rumors are true. Hunger warps morality. Power, even minimal power, attracts abuse. Some council members take bribes. Some protect their own families at the expense of others. But many do not. Many are crushed under the weight of responsibility, despised by those they try to help, terrorized by those they must obey. The psychological toll is immense. Council members rarely sleep. Their faces age rapidly. Hair turns gray within months. They carry guilt that cannot be shared, decisions that cannot be undone. They live knowing that history will judge them harshly without ever fully understanding the constraints under which they acted. Some attempt to resign. Resignation is not permitted. Some attempt suicide. Others cling to the belief that every day delayed is a day saved. German policy relies on this structure. The councils make mass control possible without constant German presence. Orders are transmitted downward. Compliance is enforced internally. Resistance is fragmented. Community trust erodes as people begin to see one another as competitors for survival. Hunger sharpens divisions. The councils are blamed for starvation, even though the policy is imposed from outside. This blame is not accidental. It is part of the design. One of the most devastating moments comes when deportations begin. Councils are ordered to assemble people at collection points. Entire families are summoned by name. The instructions are specific and chillingly calm. Bring belongings. Report at a certain hour. Failure to appear will result in punishment. Council members are told that compliance will prevent violence. That order will save lives. That chaos will make things worse. Some council leaders believe this, or need to believe it. They imagine that sending the sick or elderly first might spare the young. That meeting quotas might end further demands. That cooperation might buy time until the war turns. Others know the truth, or suspect it, but see no alternative. Refusal would lead to immediate massacres. Compliance at least offers the possibility of minimizing damage. These calculations haunt them endlessly. Inside the ghettos, scenes of unbearable cruelty unfold. People gather at assembly points, clutching bundles, children clinging to parents. Council members stand nearby, forced to assist, eyes downcast. Shouting erupts. German guards strike with rifle, butts. Families are torn apart. The sound of screaming echoes through streets already familiar with suffering. Those not selected watch from windows, paralyzed by relief and guilt. Some council members attempt subtle resistance, falsifying records, hiding people, delaying orders, sending warnings through whispered channels. These acts are dangerous. Discovery means execution. Still, they persist where possible, driven by conscience rather than hope of success. Others conclude that resistance is futile and focus on survival. History will struggle to categorize them because the situation defies simple judgment. The councils also oversee daily administration, housing assignments that force families out of already crowded rooms, sanitation measures that cannot prevent disease, labor assignments that exhaust already weakened bodies. Each task reinforces their role as instruments of a system designed to kill. Yet without them, German authorities would simply impose direct rule with even greater brutality. This knowledge offers no comfort. Children approach council offices begging for food. Old men collapse in hallways. Women scream accusations, calling council members traitors, murderers, collaborators. Sometimes council members are beaten by their own people. Sometimes they accept it silently, believing they deserve the anger, even if they do not deserve the blame. The moral universe inside the ghetto collapses under the weight of impossible choices. As conditions worsen, German authorities increase pressure. Quotas rise. Deadlines shorten. Punishments escalate. Councils are forced to choose who works and who does not, knowing that those without work permits are at greater risk of deportation. Every selection creates enemies. Every exclusion creates grief. The councils become lightning rods for suffering, absorbing hatred that might otherwise turn outward. Some council leaders attempt to negotiate with German officials, appealing to efficiency, productivity, order. They argue that healthier workers are more productive, that starvation undermines labor output. These arguments are occasionally accepted, temporarily. Small concessions are granted, then revoked. The pattern reinforces the illusion that rational negotiation is possible, even as the system moves inexorably toward annihilation. The longer the councils exist, the more isolated their members become. They cannot confide in family. They cannot explain their decisions publicly. They are trapped between German terror and Jewish despair, belonging fully to neither side. Their authority is absolute within the ghetto and non-existent outside it. They wield power that cannot protect them. As deportations intensify, some council members break. They refuse to compile lists. They sabotage orders openly. The consequences are swift. Public execution. Replacement by someone more compliant. The machinery does not pause. It does not mourn. It simply substitutes parts and continues. Others continue until the end, clinging to the belief that order is better than chaos, that some lives saved are better than none. When liquidation comes, council members are often among the last to be deported or killed. Their usefulness exhausted, they're discarded like everyone else. The illusion of protection vanishes in an instant. After the war, the legacy of the Judenreich becomes one of the most painful and controversial aspects of ghetto history. Survivors debate their role fiercely. Were they collaborators? Were they victims? Were they tragic figures trapped in an impossible position? There are no answers that satisfy everyone. The truth is fractured, like the world that produced it. What cannot be denied is the cruelty of the system that forced these councils into existence. A system that weaponized responsibility, that turned leadership into a form of torture, that forced people to choose between evils under threat of death. The Judenreich were not created to save lives. They were created to manage destruction more efficiently. As the chapter of daily administration gives way to mass deportation, the councils stand at the center of a moral catastrophe engineered by others. They are witnesses, participants, victims, and scapegoats all at once. Their story is not one of simple betrayal or of simple heroism, but of human beings crushed between power and survival. And as the ghettos move closer to their final phase, the councils face a truth they can no longer delay. No amount of organization, no list, no negotiation will stop what is coming. The system they have been forced to administer is preparing to erase the very people they were meant to represent. The question now is no longer how to manage life inside the ghetto. It is whether anyone can escape the fate that has already been decided. Chapter 7. Children of the Ghettos. The smallest shoes were out first. Leather splits at the toes, soles thinned to paper, laces replaced with string. Children walk the ghetto streets with feet that have outgrown their footwear, ankles too thin, knees too sharp, faces too old for their age. They move quietly, instinctively, as if the city itself has taught them how to survive by not being noticed. Childhood does not end here in a single moment. It erodes, hour by hour, until what remains is something smaller, harder, and far more fragile. In the ghettos, children are everywhere and nowhere at the same time. They sleep on floors, under tables, in stairwells. They line up at soup kitchens holding bowls nearly as large as their heads. They watch adults with eyes that miss nothing. Hunger teaches them quickly. Fear teaches them faster. There is no protected space left for innocence. Every sound carries meaning. Every silence feels dangerous. Many children arrive already traumatized. They have watched parents beaten in public. They have been dragged from homes in the middle of the night. They remember the smell of burning synagogues, the shattering of glass, the laughter of soldiers who treated terror like entertainment. Inside the ghetto walls, those memories do not fade. They sharpen, replayed endlessly during restless nights. Hunger reshapes young bodies with brutal speed. Arms thin until bones press against skin. Bellies swell with malnutrition. Growth halts. Some children shrink visibly, as if the body itself is retreating. Faces hollow. Eyes grow too large. Hair becomes brittle. Energy drains away, replaced by a quiet lethargy that alarms parents who know what it means. A child who stops asking for food is often closer to death than one who still cries. Parents attempt the impossible. They shield children from reality while living inside it. They lie gently, promising meals that may never come, futures they can no longer imagine. Mothers skip food entirely, pushing bread toward small hands. Fathers trade possessions for scraps, watches and wedding rings exchanged for a few potatoes. Each sacrifice buys time, not safety. Smuggling becomes the lifeline, and children become its primary carriers. Their small size allows them to slip through cracks in walls, holes in fences, gaps beneath gates. They crawl through sewers, emerge on the other side covered in filth, hearts pounding, lungs burning. They learn which guards can be distracted, which routes are safest, which hours offer the least risk. Every trip is a gamble with death. Yet they go again and again, because without them, families starve faster. If caught, punishment is swift. Sometimes it is a beating. Sometimes it is execution. The sight of a child's body left in the street is meant to send a message. It does. But it does not stop the smuggling. Hunger is stronger than fear. Survival outweighs terror. Parents beg children not to go. Children go anyway. Orphans multiply rapidly. Disease, starvation, executions, deportations. Children wake up to find a parent cold and still beside them. Others return from errands to discover empty rooms, belongings gone, names whispered by neighbors. There is no time for proper grief. Orphans cluster together, forming fragile families of necessity. Older children care for younger ones, sharing crumbs, guarding sleep, inventing routines to create a sense of order where none exists. Schools are officially forbidden, but education persists in fragments. Lessons are whispered in basements, scribbled on scraps of paper, recited from memory. Teachers continue without pay, without materials, driven by a belief that knowledge itself is a form of resistance. Children learn mathematics, history, poetry, even as their bodies weaken. These lessons are not preparation for a future that seems unlikely. They are acts of defiance against erasure. Play does not disappear entirely, but it changes. Games become quieter, shorter, more cautious. A ball made from rags. A race that stops abruptly when footsteps approach. Laughter that dies quickly, cut short by fear of attention. Even joy feels dangerous here. Children learn when to suppress it. Illness strikes children relentlessly. Typhus does not spare the young. Fever burns through small bodies faster, leaving them delirious, shivering, sometimes blind. There is little medicine, little care beyond comfort. Parents hold children through the night, listening to labored breathing, knowing there is nothing more they can do. When death comes, it is often gentle, a quiet slipping away that leaves behind unbearable silence. The ghettos also steal adolescence. Teenagers are forced into adult roles overnight. They work long hours in workshops, carrying loads too heavy for their frames. They negotiate with smugglers, bribe guards, make decisions that no child should ever face. Their voices deepen, their faces harden. Dreams are postponed indefinitely, then forgotten. German policy does not distinguish between child and adult when it comes to control. Children must wear identifying marks. They are subject to curfews, searches, punishments. During deportations, they are herded alongside parents, sometimes torn away during selections. The sound of children screaming for mothers becomes a defining memory for survivors. It echoes long after the walls fall. Some children hide during deportations, concealed in attics, cellars, behind false walls. They remain motionless for hours, days, sometimes weeks. Hunger gnaws. Muscles cramp. Fear becomes physical. Those discovered are dragged out without hesitation. Those who survive hiding emerge changed, eyes haunted, voices subdued. Psychologically, the damage is immense. Nightmares are constant. Bedwetting returns in children who had long since grown out of it. Sudden noises trigger panic. Many stop speaking altogether. Silence becomes a defense, a way to avoid attention, a way to conserve energy. Trauma settles deep, shaping personalities long after the war ends. Yet even here, acts of courage shine through. Children warn neighbors of impending raids. They memorize routes, times, patterns. They carry messages for resistance groups, unnoticed by guards who underestimate them. Some participate directly in underground movements, delivering information, hiding weapons, standing watch. Their bravery is rarely recognized, but is real. The presence of children also complicates moral decisions for adults. Councils struggle with labor quotas that exempt children but doom parents. Resistance groups debate whether armed action will endanger the youngest. Parents face impossible choices, whether to keep children close or send them away if escape routes exist. Every decision risks death. As ghettos deteriorate further, children die in increasing numbers. Their bodies are lighter, more vulnerable. Starvation claims them faster. Disease spreads through classrooms, orphan groups, crowded apartments. The streets see more small forms wrapped in cloth, carried away without ceremony. Each loss diminishes the future the ghetto once held. German observers note these deaths without comment. Reports record numbers, not names. Children are statistics, not lives. Their disappearance is considered acceptable collateral, even desirable. A population that cannot reproduce is easier to eliminate. Despite everything, children continue to imagine. They draw pictures of homes, trees, animals. They ask questions adults cannot answer. They plan birthdays that will never be celebrated. These moments of imagination are painful, beautiful, and fleeting. They reveal what is being destroyed, not just bodies, but possibility. As deportations intensify, children sense the change even before adults explain it. They feel tension in whispered conversations, see panic in eyes, notice bags being packed hurriedly. Some ask where they are going. Some already know not to ask. Fear becomes ambient, like the air itself. On the day of a roundup, children cling to parents instinctively. Hands grip tightly. Tears flow freely. Guards shout. Crowds surge. In the chaos, some children are pushed aside, lost, trampled. Others are lifted onto carts, crying until voices break. Those left behind watch in stunned silence, unsure whether to feel relief or terror. For those children who survive the ghettos, survival itself becomes a burden. They carry memories too heavy for their years. They remember hunger as a constant ache, fear as a permanent companion. After liberation, many struggle to adapt to a world that feels unreal, too quiet, too full. Childhood does not resume. It is already gone. The story of children in the ghettos is not only one of suffering, but of exposure. Exposure to cruelty, to responsibility, to mortality. They saw what adults hoped to shield them from. They learned truths no child should learn. And through it all, they endured. As the ghettos move closer to their final phase, children stand at the center of the coming catastrophe. They're the least able to survive what lies ahead, and the most affected by every decision made around them. When the walls finally open, it will not be for release, but for transport. And for many children, the journey will end before they ever understand where they are being taken. In the quiet moments before that future arrives, a child sits on a windowsill, staring at a wall that blocks the street beyond. They trace the cracks in the brick with a finger, imagining what lies on the other side. They do not know the word ghetto. They do not know the word genocide. They only know hunger, fear, and the fading memory of a life that once felt safe. And that is enough to tell the story. Chapter 8: Culture, Faith, and Resistance of the Spirit. The sound is almost lost beneath the noise of hunger and sickness. A violin string tightening. A pencil scratching softly against paper. A whispered prayer murmured behind a closed door. These sounds do not stop the suffering. They do not break the walls. But they matter. In places designed to strip people of identity, culture becomes a final line of defense. Here, where the body is starved and confined, the spirit refuses to disappear quietly. Inside the ghettos, German policy aims not only to kill, but to erase, to reduce people to numbers, to labor units, to problems on a ledger. Culture threatens that goal. Faith threatens it. Memory threatens it most of all. And so every song sung, every word written, every lesson taught becomes an act of resistance, whether the singer intends it or not. Music drifts through cramped apartments late at night. Sometimes it is organized, rehearsed quietly, performed for small audiences who sit shoulder to shoulder on broken chairs. Other times it is spontaneous, a melody hummed to distract from hunger or grief. Violins are patched together with wire. Pianos are missing keys. Voices crack from malnutrition. Still, the music continues. Not because it offers escape, but because it affirms existence. As long as a song can be sung, the ghetto has not fully won. Theater appears in basements and attics, staged under constant threat. Scripts are memorized because paper is dangerous. Actors perform without costumes, without sets, without applause that lasts more than a moment. The stories are familiar, drawn from pre-war life, from folklore, from history. They remind audiences of who they were before confinement. Laughter breaks out unexpectedly, sharp and almost painful. For a brief moment, the walls seem to recede. Then the lights go out, and reality rushes back in. Writers document everything. They write not because they expect survival, but because they expect death. Diaries are kept meticulously, recording weather, ration amounts, names of the dead, rumors of deportations. Words are hidden in jars, buried beneath buildings, sealed in walls. Writers know they may not live to see their words read. That does not matter. What matters is that the truth exists somewhere, waiting. Language itself becomes resistance. Yiddish phrases whispered in defiance of imposed German order. Hebrew prayers recited despite bans. Even silence is shaped deliberately, chosen over coerced speech. Naming things accurately becomes a moral act. Calling starvation what it is. Calling murder what it is. Refusing to adopt the euphemisms of the oppressor. Education persists against all logic. Classes are held in secret. Children clustered around adults who remember how to teach. Lessons are short, fragmented, interrupted by raids or exhaustion. Mathematics, literature, history, even science. Not because exams await, but because learning asserts continuity. Because knowledge ties the present to a future that still feels possible in imagination, if nowhere else. Faith adapts under pressure. Religious services are stripped down to essentials, prayers whispered instead of sung. Synagogues, where they still stand, are overcrowded and under constant threat. Many are destroyed. Others are repurposed by German authorities into warehouses or stables. Yet belief persists, fractured and reshaped. Some cling to faith fiercely, finding meaning in ritual even as suffering intensifies. Others turn away, unable to reconcile devastation with belief. Both responses are deeply human. Holidays are marked quietly, often symbolically. A candle lit with the last bit of wax. A prayer spoken from memory. A piece of bread broken and shared to mark what cannot be properly celebrated. These moments are painful reminders of loss, but also anchors to identity. They say we are still here. We still remember who we are. Art emerges from scraps. Drawings made with charcoal, with dirt, with stolen pencil stubs. Scenes of pre-war life. Faces of loved ones lost. Imagine landscapes free of walls. Children draw especially often, their pictures revealing both innocence and trauma. Adults preserve these drawings carefully, as if they are relics of a world that no longer exists. Underground newspapers circulate hand to hand, copied laboriously by hand or with crude presses. They contain news from outside, rumors of the war, commentary, poetry. Possession is dangerous. Discovery means death. Still they spread. Information becomes resistance, because ignorance is another form of imprisonment. Alongside cultural resistance grows something more overt. Organized resistance cells form quietly, cautiously. Young people, especially, begin to question whether survival through obedience is possible. They share information, establish contact with groups outside the ghetto, acquire weapons when they can. The weapons are pitiful. A few pistols, homemade explosives, knives, but the intent behind them is immense. Resistance is not only armed, it is refusal. Refusal to give names easily. Refusal to abandon dignity. Refusal to believe the lies offered by German authorities. It is the decision to document, to teach, to pray, to sing, even when the outcome is already known. German officials are aware of this resistance of the spirit, even if they do not fully understand it. Cultural activities are monitored, sometimes tolerated briefly, then crushed. Performances are banned. Schools shut down. Writers arrested. Yet suppression only pushes these activities further underground, where they become more symbolic, more dangerous, more defiant. The ghettos develop an internal moral debate. Is culture a distraction that weakens resistance, or a foundation that makes resistance possible? Is preserving tradition an act of survival, or an illusion that delays necessary confrontation? There are no clear answers. People choose based on temperament, belief, exhaustion. All choices carry risk. Young people often feel the tension most acutely. Raised on stories of history and identity, they struggle to reconcile those ideals with daily degradation. Many turn toward organized resistance, believing that dignity lies in defiance, even if it leads to death. Others pour themselves into education and culture, believing survival itself is the ultimate resistance. These paths sometimes clash, sometimes overlap. The presence of culture also deepens loss. A song remembered makes silence afterward more painful. A prayer spoken highlights unanswered suffering. Art sharpens awareness of what is being destroyed. Yet people continue anyway, accepting the pain as part of bearing witness. As conditions worsen, cultural activity becomes more urgent, not less. Writers write faster. Teachers teach despite collapsing health. Musicians play even as fingers tremble. There is a sense, unspoken but understood, that time is running out. That what is not recorded now may never be recorded at all. German plans accelerate quietly in the background. Deportations loom. Rumors grow darker. Cultural gatherings become acts of farewell as much as resistance. People attend performances knowing they may not see one another again. Applause is muted. Eyes linger longer. Embraces last just a second more than before. Faith is tested brutally. Some find strength in belief that suffering has meaning beyond human understanding. Others rage against silence. Both responses coexist, sometimes within the same person. Prayer becomes less about answers and more about connection, about not being entirely alone in the dark. The resistance of the spirit does not save the ghettos. It does not stop starvation, disease, or deportation, but it changes the meaning of what happens inside the walls. It ensures that the people confined there are not reduced to victims alone. They are creators, thinkers, believers, witnesses. When deportations begin in earnest, cultural artifacts are hidden hastily, manuscripts buried, instruments concealed, children's drawings folded and tucked away. People prioritize these objects even as they pack for forced journeys, knowing they may not return. Memory is packed alongside bread, alongside clothing, alongside fear. As the ghettos edge closer to destruction, the resistance of the spirit becomes a final statement. You can take our bodies, it says, but you cannot fully take who we were. That message is fragile, easily broken, but it endures in fragments, in buried jars, in memories carried by survivors. On a quiet night, a group gathers in a darkened room. Someone recites a poem from memory. Another hums a tune barely audible. For a few minutes, hunger recedes. Fear loosens its grip. The walls feel thinner. Then footsteps approach, and the room falls silent. The moment passes, but its existence matters. Because in a world engineered to strip humanity away piece by piece, the simple act of creating, believing, and remembering becomes a form of rebellion that no wall can fully contain. And as the ghettos move toward their final chapter, that rebellion will take on a new and more dangerous shape, one that no longer hides in basements or whispers in the dark. Chapter 9: Disease and Silence. Typhus, Death, and Mass Graves. The first sign is the scratching. Fingers raking against skin until it bleeds. Lice burrowed deep into seams of clothing, into blankets that have not been washed in months, in a hair already thinned by hunger. The itching keeps people awake at night. Sleep comes in fragments, broken by fever dreams and shivering. In the ghettos, disease does not arrive suddenly. It creeps in, settles, and then takes hold with terrifying efficiency. Typhus spreads quietly at first, a headache that refuses to fade, a fever that rises and does not break, red spots appearing on skin already stretched thin. People tell themselves it is exhaustion, hunger, cold. They keep working until they collapse. By the time the illness is recognized, it has already passed through entire buildings. In the ghettos, contagion does not need invitation. Overcrowding welcomes it in. Rooms packed with bodies become incubators. 10, 15 people sharing a single space. No fresh air. No clean water. No soap. Clothing worn day and night. Never removed. Never cleaned. Lice thrive in this environment, carrying disease from one weakened body to the next. A single infected person can doom dozens. And once the fever takes hold, survival depends less on will than on chance. Hospitals inside the ghettos are overwhelmed almost immediately. They are hospitals in name only. There are no medicines, no disinfectants, no supplies beyond bare hands and rags. Doctors work until they collapse, themselves half-starved, faces hollow, hands trembling. They diagnose by touch, by smell, by instinct. They know most patients will not recover. Still, they try, because not trying would mean surrender. The sound inside these wards is unforgettable. Labored breathing, moans of pain, delirious muttering, the rattle in chest that signals the end is near. Beds are shared, sometimes by the living and the dead together, because there is nowhere else to put the bodies. Sheets are stiff with sweat and blood. The air is thick, sour, heavy with the smell of sickness and decay. Outside the hospitals, fear spreads faster than the disease itself. People avoid neighbors who cough. Families isolate the sick as best they can, though isolation is nearly impossible. A feverish child lies in the same room as siblings, parents, grandparents. Everyone knows what this means. Everyone pretends not to. German authorities are fully aware of the epidemics. Reports detail infection rates and mortality. The response is not aid, but containment. Ghettos are sealed, even tighter, under the pretext of preventing disease from spreading outside the walls. The irony is lethal. The very conditions imposed to control disease ensure its explosion. This is not negligence. It is policy. Public notices appear, blaming Jews for the epidemics ravaging the ghettos. Posters warn of contamination, reinforcing fear among the surrounding population. The message is clear. What happens inside the walls is dangerous, necessary, justified. Disease becomes another tool of dehumanization, another excuse for abandonment. As typhus claims more lives, burial systems collapse. At first, families carry their dead with care, reciting prayers, marking graves as best they can. Soon, there are too many. Gravediggers cannot keep up. Cemeteries overflow. Bodies accumulate in courtyards, stairwells, streets. Carts roll through the ghetto, collecting corpses like refuse, the wheels splashing through puddles, the smell trailing behind them. Mass graves become the only solution. Trenches are dug quickly, often by forced laborers already weakened by hunger. Bodies are stacked without ceremony. Names are not recorded. There is no time. The ground is frozen in winter, making digging nearly impossible. Bodies wait days, sometimes weeks, for burial. Children step around them on their way to fetch water. Death becomes part of the landscape. The silence around this death is profound. There are no sirens, no announcements, no mourning rituals large enough to match the scale of loss. Grief is internalized, compressed, swallowed. People stop asking who has died and start asking who is still alive. Survival becomes a daily census. Disease does not discriminate, but hunger does. Those already weakened succumb faster. The elderly fall first, then children, then those who have lost the will to fight. Fever strips away remaining strength, leaving bodies too weak to lift a cup of water. Families watch helplessly as loved ones burn with heat, then slip into stillness. The moment of death is often quiet, almost peaceful, which makes it all the more unbearable. Doctors keep records when they can. Numbers, dates, causes of death. These records are acts of defiance, proof that these lives existed. Some doctors bury their notes alongside the dead, hoping someone will find them later. Others memorize details, carrying them in their minds as a form of witness. Memory becomes a burden and a responsibility. German officials sometimes visit the ghettos during outbreaks. They wear gloves, masks. They keep distance. They inspect conditions with clinical interest, noting the efficiency with which disease reduces the population. No emergency measures are ordered. No supplies delivered. The conclusion is implicit. The epidemic is useful. Inside the ghettos, rumors swirl. Some believe the Germans are poisoning wells. Others believe disease is divine punishment. Fear distorts understanding. What is clear is that death is accelerating. People begin to mark days not by calendars, but by funerals. 1 today, 3 tomorrow, 10 next week. Children are especially vulnerable. Typhus burns through their small bodies quickly. Parents hold feverish children through long nights, whispering comfort they do not believe. When death comes, it is often sudden. A child who seemed stable in the morning is gone by evening. Parents scream into pillows because screaming aloud draws attention. Silence becomes a survival skill. The psychological impact of constant death is crushing. People become numb, not because they do not care, but because caring requires energy they no longer have. Tears dry up. Shock settles in. Some stop reacting altogether, moving through days like ghosts. Others become consumed by fear, convinced that every headache is a death sentence. Mass graves erase individuality. They deny the dead their names, their stories, their dignity. This is precisely the point. German policy aims not only to kill, but to erase memory. A person buried without a marker becomes easier to forget. The ghettos become places where people vanish not only from life, but from history. Yet memory persists in fragments. A woman memorizes the location of a trench where her husband was buried. A child remembers the sound of soil hitting wood. A doctor recalls the exact day the fever took a colleague. These memories survive even when official records do not. As disease spreads, fear of contagion isolates people further. The sick are avoided, sometimes abandoned, not out of cruelty, but terror. Parents hesitate before touching feverish children. Neighbors close doors. Community bonds strain under the pressure. Disease turns everyone into a potential threat. German propaganda exploits this fear. Notices emphasize hygiene, knowing full well that hygiene is impossible under ghetto conditions. The implication is clear. The suffering is self-inflicted. The reality is the opposite. Disease thrives because of deliberate overcrowding, starvation, and neglect. Winter worsens everything. Cold weakens immune systems further. Frozen ground delays burials. Bodies pile higher. The smell intensifies when thaws come, releasing weeks of accumulated death. Summer brings its own horrors. Heat accelerates decay. Flies swarm. Infection spreads faster. There is no season of relief. As mortality rises, deportations continue. Sick people are often included, herded onto transports despite fever and weakness. Some die en route. Others are shot when they cannot keep up. Disease and deportation merge into a single process of elimination. Inside the ghettos, people begin to understand that death is not an unfortunate byproduct of war. It is an intended outcome. Hunger weakens bodies. Overcrowding spreads disease. Disease kills silently. The system functions without drawing attention, without the noise of gunfire. It is murder disguised as neglect. Mass graves fill quietly. No ceremonies mark their completion. No names are carved. The earth closes over countless lives, each one with a history, a voice, a future that will never come. Cities become cemeteries not through sudden catastrophe, but through relentless accumulation. As the months pass, the ghettos lose population steadily. Streets grow emptier. Windows go dark. Entire buildings fall silent. The absence is as striking as the presence once was. Death leaves behind space, and that space is quickly filled by new arrivals from surrounding areas, restarting the cycle. German authorities track these changes meticulously. Population numbers decrease. Mortality increases. Reports are filed. Conclusions drawn. The ghettos are nearing the end of their usefulness as containment zones. They have weakened the population sufficiently. The next phase will require movement, not stagnation. Inside the ghettos, people sense this shift. Disease has stripped away illusions. Survival feels increasingly temporary. Rumors of camps grow louder, of trains that do not return, of places where disease is replaced by something faster, more final. One evening, a cart rolls through the ghetto at dusk, piled high with bodies. A child watches from a doorway, eyes hollow, silent. The cart disappears around a corner, headed toward a trench that will soon be filled. No marker will remain, only memory. As night falls, the ghetto grows quiet, not peaceful, empty. The silence left by disease is heavy, oppressive. It presses in from all sides, filling rooms where voices once argued, laughed, prayed. The walls stand unchanged, indifferent to the suffering they enclose. Disease has done its work. It has thinned the population, broken resistance, prepared bodies for what comes next. And as the last light fades, a realization settles over those who remain. The deaths they have witnessed are not the end of the story. They are only the beginning of something even more devastating, already moving toward the gates. Chapter 10. Deportations begin. The illusion of resettlement. The order arrives quietly, almost politely. Notices are posted on walls at dawn, printed neatly, written in official language that avoids the word everyone fears. People are instructed to report for resettlement. Bring belongings. Food for several days. Work documents. Families read the notices again and again, searching for hidden meaning. Some cling to the word relocation as proof that survival is still possible. Others feel the ground give way beneath them instantly. The tone is calm. That is what makes it terrifying. For months, rumors have circulated through the ghettos like smoke. Whispers of camps, of trains that go east and never return, of mass death hidden behind forests and barbed wire. But rumors are easy to dismiss when hunger already consumes all attention. Now, the rumors have shape, time, place, instructions. The uncertainty that once haunted daily life is replaced by something worse. Direction. On the morning deportations begin, the ghetto feels different. The air is tense, electric, heavy with fear. People move faster, speak less. Doors slam. Bundles are tied with shaking hands. Parents argue in whispers about what to bring. A coat or bread. Shoes or photographs. Children watch silently, sensing danger but not understanding its scale. The streets fill early, people clutching parcels, ration cards, documents that once meant survival and now mean nothing at all. German guards take positions at intersections, rifles ready, faces unreadable. Auxiliary police assist, some eager, some reluctant, all complicit. Whistles pierce the air. Orders are shouted. The illusion of choice evaporates quickly. Those who do not appear are dragged from homes. Doors are broken down. Hiding places are discovered. The sound of boots on staircases becomes a death knell. Assembly points are established in open squares, courtyards, near railway sidings. People are herded into lines that stretch endlessly. The smell of sweat and fear is overwhelming. Children cry openly. Adults try to remain composed, believing that panic will make things worse. Some still believe the lie. They imagine work camps, farms, new ghettos, anywhere but death. The language used by German officials is deliberate. Deportation is framed as necessity, as labor allocation, as efficiency. Those selected are told they are being sent to work. The sick and elderly are included anyway. Questions are met with blows. Clarification is not permitted. Obedience is the only acceptable response. Jewish councils are forced to assist. They are ordered to provide lists, to manage crowds, to ensure quotas are met. Council members stand at the edges of assembly points, faces pale, eyes hollow. They know more now than they did before, or they suspect enough. Their presence does not calm the crowd. It deepens the sense of betrayal, even when betrayal is not the truth. Families cling to one another desperately. Parents lift children onto shoulders, afraid of losing sight of them. Couples refuse to let go of hands. In the chaos, separation happens anyway. Guards pull people from lines arbitrarily. Children are torn from parents. Elderly are shoved aside. The sound of screaming cuts through the air, raw and animal. It echoes off walls that have already absorbed so much suffering. Some try to resist. A man refuses to move. A woman collapses deliberately. A child hides beneath a cart. The response is immediate and brutal. Gunshots crack through the square. Bodies fall. Blood stains the pavement. The crowd recoils, then freezes. The lesson is clear. Resistance will not slow the process. It will only make it more violent. Those deemed unfit for transport are often killed on the spot. The sick, the weak, the very young. Their bodies are dragged aside, piled hastily, ignored. The efficiency is chilling. Death becomes a logistical decision. Who can walk? Who cannot? Who is worth transporting? Who is not? As the day progresses, transports fill. People are forced onto trucks or marched toward railway stations. The sound of trains waiting nearby is unmistakable. Metal clanks. Steam hisses. Wheels screech. The smell of coal smoke mixes with terror. For many, this is the first time they have seen a train since the ghetto was sealed. The sight does not bring hope. It brings dread. Railway cars stand open, dark and empty. They are freight cars, not passenger trains. No seats, no windows, no toilets. Guards force people inside, packing them tightly. Shouts fill the air. People beg for water, for air, for mercy. The doors slide shut with a heavy final sound that echoes across the platform. From inside, fists pound against wood. Screams grow muffled as trains begin to move. Those left behind watch in stunned silence. Relief and guilt mix painfully. They know their turn may come tomorrow, or the next day, or not at all, depending on how many are needed. Survival becomes a matter of numbers, not merit. The illusion of resettlement persists only briefly. Word spreads quickly inside the ghettos. Those deported do not send letters. They do not return. Trains leave full and come back empty. Rumors harden into certainty. The destination is death, though the exact form remains unclear. Fear shifts into something colder, more focused. Hiding becomes widespread. False walls are built. Attics sealed. Cellars reinforced. People crawl into spaces barely large enough to breathe. Children are drugged to keep them quiet. Hours stretch into days. Silence becomes agony. Those discovered are dragged out screaming. Those who remain hidden listen, helpless, as footsteps pass inches away. German authorities respond with collective punishment. Entire buildings are emptied when quotas are not met. Streets are sealed. Raids intensify. The ghettos shrink physically as deportations remove entire sections of population. Empty apartments are reassigned or left to decay. The sense of impermanence deepens. Nothing feels stable. Everything feels temporary, including life. Some choose suicide rather than deportation. Poison is hoarded. Knives are sharpened. Families make pacts. These decisions are made quietly, without drama. Death chosen feels preferable to death imposed. Parents make impossible choices, sometimes killing children to spare them what they believe awaits. These acts leave scars that never heal, even among survivors. Resistance groups face a turning point. Debate intensifies. Is armed resistance possible? Is it worth the inevitable retaliation? Some argue that dying fighting preserves dignity. Others argue that survival, however slim, requires caution. The first weapons are distributed. Pistols hidden. Homemade bombs prepared. The ghetto becomes a pressure cooker. Violence imminent, but directionless. German officials escalate their language. Deportations are renamed evacuations. Then actions. Then simply transports. The euphemisms fall away as urgency increases. The goal is no longer concealment. It is speed. Entire ghettos are scheduled for liquidation. Timetables are drawn. Trains allocated. The machinery of death accelerates. Inside the ghettos, life collapses into waiting. Waiting for knocks at the door. Waiting for whistles. Waiting for lists to be posted. Time loses coherence. People measure days by deportations, not dates. Each transport removes neighbors, friends, family. Absence becomes the dominant feature of the city. Children sense the finality, even when adults do not explain it. They cling more tightly. They ask fewer questions. Their silence is heavy. Some are hidden with non-Jewish families outside the ghetto, smuggled through cracks in walls, handed over in desperate secrecy. Goodbyes are rushed, tearless, because tears would draw attention. Many of these children will never see their parents again. The deportations also change the behavior of guards. Some grow more brutal, drunk on power. Others avert their eyes, moving mechanically through their tasks. Indifference becomes the norm. The extraordinary becomes routine. Killing, separating, hurting. It all blends into daily work. As transports continue, the ghettos hollow out. Streets grow eerily quiet between actions. Shops stand abandoned. Workshops fall silent. The population that remains is increasingly young, increasingly desperate, increasingly aware that survival through obedience is no longer an option. German authorities take note of resistance rumors. Informants are planted. Leaders arrested. Executions are staged publicly to discourage defiance. The threat is explicit. Any resistance will result in total destruction. This threat is not idle. It is policy. One evening, after a day of deportations, rain begins to fall. It washes blood from pavement, dilutes stains, leaves the city looking almost normal. But the silence remains. The absence remains. The knowledge that thousands have been sent to their death settles heavily over those still breathing. The illusion of resettlement dies completely. No one believes the lies anymore. The question is no longer where the trains go. It is whether anyone can avoid them. Survival becomes an act of rebellion. Every hidden body, every forged document, every delayed transport feels like a small victory against an overwhelming force. As night falls, fires burn in some buildings, set deliberately to destroy records, to erase evidence, to cover escapes. Smoke rises above the walls. Guards shout orders. Shots ring out sporadically. The ghetto feels like a place on the brink of explosion. Deportations have transformed the ghettos from places of slow death into gateways to immediate annihilation. The waiting is nearly over. The system has revealed its true purpose. What remains now is the question of how the end will come. Quietly, with obedience, or violently, with resistance. Somewhere inside the shrinking ghetto, a group gathers in a darkened room. Weapons are laid out on a table. Faces are drawn, determined, terrified. Outside, another train whistles in the distance, closer now, louder. The final phase is approaching, and the city, once turned into a cemetery, is about to become a battlefield. Chapter 11. Uprisings and Defiance. Choosing how to die. The first gunshot inside the ghetto sounds wrong. Not because gunfire is unfamiliar, but because this time it does not come from a guard. It comes from within, a sharp crack that cuts through the air, followed by stunned silence. For a brief moment, no one moves. Then shouting erupts. Orders barked. Boots running. The illusion that obedience might still lead to survival collapses instantly. This is the moment when waiting ends. By the time armed resistance begins, the ghettos are already dying. Starvation has hollowed bodies. Disease has thinned the population. Deportations have torn families apart. The people who remain are those who could hide, those who were spared temporarily, those who chose to stay behind. They are younger, angrier, more desperate, and they understand something with brutal clarity. There is no future inside these walls. The trains have made that clear. Survival through compliance is no longer an option. Only choice remains. Resistance does not emerge suddenly. It grows slowly, quietly, in whispers and glances. Young people meet in basements and attics, speaking in code, sharing scraps of information gathered at great risk. They listen to illegal radios, piece together news from the outside world. They hear of German defeats, of battles turning. These rumors do not promise rescue, but they offer context. The enemy is not invincible. And even if liberation comes too late, dignity does not have to. Weapons are scarce to the point of absurdity. A handful of pistols, a few grenades smuggled in piece by piece, homemade explosives assembled from stolen chemicals and scrap metal, knives sharpened carefully, Molotov cocktails prepared in hidden corners. Compared to the rifles and machine guns of the occupiers, these weapons seem almost symbolic. But symbolism matters here. A weapon is not only a tool, it is a declaration. The decision to resist is not universal. Many oppose it. They fear retaliation. They fear collective punishment. They fear that armed action will bring immediate annihilation upon those still alive. These fears are not irrational. They are grounded in experience. German policy has always punished resistance with overwhelming violence. Entire streets have been executed for a single act of defiance. The debate inside the ghettos is fierce, emotional, unresolved. But the deportations change everything. When entire families disappear overnight, when children are dragged on a train screaming, when no one returns, at that point, fear loses its leverage. Death is no longer a threat. It is a certainty. The only remaining question is how it will be faced. Resistance groups form primarily among the young. Teenagers and young adults who have already lost parents, siblings, entire families. They have little left to protect except one another. Their courage is not rooted in optimism. It is rooted in clarity. They know they will not win. They do not expect survival. What they want is to choose the terms of their death. The first clashes are chaotic and brief. A patrol ambushed in a narrow street. A grenade thrown from a window. A guard shot at close range. The response is immediate. German forces flood the area, firing indiscriminately, dragging people from buildings, setting homes on fire. Smoke fills the ghetto. Flames leap from roof to roof. The air becomes thick with ash and gunpowder. For civilians caught in the middle, terror reaches new heights. Families hide in bunkers dug beneath buildings, in sewers, in crawl spaces barely large enough to breathe. Children are drugged to keep them silent. Adults lie motionless for hours, days, listening to footsteps overhead, holding their breath as German soldiers search methodically, block by block. The uprisings are not spontaneous riots. They are planned, to the extent planning is possible under such conditions. Fighters know the layout of streets intimately. They move through hidden passages, through holes in walls, across rooftops. They strike quickly, then disappear. Their goal is not territory. It is disruption, delay, chaos. Every hour gained means more people can hide. Every shot fired announces that the ghetto will not go quietly. German commanders are enraged. Ghettos were meant to be controlled spaces, efficient holding zones. Resistance threatens that efficiency. Reinforcements are brought in. Heavy weapons deployed. Artillery used against residential buildings. The ghetto becomes a war zone, not because it is strategically important, but because it is symbolically intolerable that Jews would dare to fight back. Fire becomes the primary weapon. Buildings are set ablaze systematically, forcing those hiding inside to flee or burn. Smoke chokes the streets. Visibility drops to nothing. The smell of burning wood, fabric, and flesh fills the air. People emerge coughing, hands raised, only to be shot or herded toward transports. Those who remain hidden risk suffocation. Choice disappears. Death is everywhere. Fighters hold out as long as they can. Ammunition runs low quickly. Grenades are rationed carefully. Each bullet is a decision. Who to shoot, when, whether it is worth revealing a position. Many die in close combat, shot at point-blank range. Others die when bunkers are discovered and destroyed. Some choose to end their lives rather than be captured, using poison or their last bullet. For those watching from hiding places, the uprisings are both terrifying and electrifying. Fear mixes with pride. For the first time in years, the ghetto is not entirely passive. It is acting. Even if the cost is catastrophic, the meaning is profound. The narrative imposed by the oppressor is being rejected openly, violently. German propaganda responds quickly. Uprisings are labeled criminal, terrorist, subhuman. The destruction is framed as necessary security action. Outside the ghetto walls, many accept this explanation without question. Inside, it no longer matters what is believed. Reality is measured in fire and blood. As the fighting continues, resistance groups communicate through runners, signals, coded messages. They coordinate attacks, share information about German movements, warn civilians where possible. Their organization is fragile, constantly disrupted by deaths and raids. Leadership changes rapidly as commanders fall. Decisions are made by whoever is still alive. The psychological transformation is stark. Fear gives way to resolve. People who once avoided attention now stand their ground. The instinct to survive at any cost is replaced by something else. The desire to assert humanity in the face of annihilation. To leave behind proof that submission was not universal. Women participate actively in resistance. They serve as couriers, smugglers, fighters. They carry weapons beneath clothing, transport explosives in baskets, tend to the wounded. Their roles defy every stereotype imposed upon them. In the ghetto, necessity erases old divisions. Courage takes many forms. Children witness the uprisings with a mixture of terror and awe. Some assist by carrying messages, by watching for patrols. Others hide and listen to gunfire, learning more about death in days than most learn in a lifetime. The memory of resistance becomes part of their identity, even if they do not survive to tell it. German forces eventually overwhelm every uprising. Their firepower is too great. Their numbers too large. Their willingness to destroy entire districts absolute. Ghettos are reduced to ruins, brick by brick, street by street. What once held tens of thousands becomes a field of rubble and ash. When resistance is crushed, reprisals are total. Survivors are dragged from hiding places. Executions are carried out publicly. Deportations resume at an accelerated pace. The final liquidation begins. What remains of the ghetto is emptied systematically. Yet even in defeat, the uprisings achieve something the Germans cannot undo. They shatter the narrative of helplessness. They prove that resistance existed even in the most impossible conditions. They force the occupiers to expend time, resources, and rage. They leave behind a legacy that survives the walls. For those who fought, the end often comes suddenly. A bullet, a collapse beneath rubble, smoke filling lungs until consciousness fades. Death is rarely clean, rarely heroic in appearance. But the choice behind it matters. It is the difference between being erased quietly and being remembered as someone who refused. As the last shots fade, the ghetto is silent once more. Not the silence of waiting, but the silence after destruction. Buildings smolder. Streets are empty. The city that once lived behind walls is gone, reduced to ruins and mass graves. German officers walk through the wreckage, documenting success. Reports are filed. The uprising is declared crushed. Order restored. The language is precise, clinical. It does not mention the courage, the desperation, the humanity that flared briefly before being extinguished. But the story does not end here. Survivors carry it forward. Diaries buried beneath rubble. Memories etched into minds. Testimonies whispered later, then spoken aloud, then written down. The uprisings echo far beyond the ghettos that house them. They echo in camps where prisoners whisper of resistance, in forests where partisans fight, in future generations who ask how people could resist under such conditions, and learn that they did. The uprisings do not save the ghettos. They do not stop the genocide, but they change its meaning. They turn victims into actors, even if only briefly. They assert that even when stripped of food, shelter, family, and future, human beings can still choose defiance. As the smoke clears and the last of the ghetto is erased, one truth remains, stubborn and unkillable. The walls did not fully succeed. They contained bodies, but not will. And in the end, that refusal to disappear quietly becomes one of the most enduring legacies of places designed to leave none at all. Chapter 12, Liquidation. The final erasure of the ghettos. The end does not arrive suddenly. It announces itself in fragments. A new curfew posted at dawn. An unexplained tightening of patrols. Trains heard more frequently at night. Orders delivered with a sharpness that leaves no room for interpretation. People feel it before they understand it. The ghetto is no longer being managed. It is being emptied. Liquidation is the word used by German authorities. Clean. Administrative. Final. It means the total removal of the Jewish population from the ghetto, whether through deportation, execution, or forced labor. It means the end of the ghetto as a place where life, however degraded, still exists. It means erasure. On the morning liquidation begins, the ghetto wakes to a different kind of silence. Streets are already lined with soldiers. Not just guards, but units brought in specifically for this purpose. Rifles gleam. Dogs strain at leashes. Heavy vehicles idle. Engines rumbling low and constant. The sound alone sends a message. This is not another deportation action. This is the last one. Orders are shouted through loudspeakers, distorted and harsh. Everyone must report immediately. Anyone found hiding will be shot. Anyone aiding escape will be executed along with their family. Buildings are to be cleared systematically, block by block, floor by floor. The precision is chilling. Maps have been prepared, timetables drawn. The destruction of the ghetto has been planned as carefully as its creation. People pour into the streets, carrying nothing now. They have learned. Bundles are useless. Documents meaningless. What they bring instead are children, elders, the sick, those who cannot hide. Families move together instinctively, even though they know they will likely be separated. Hands grip tightly. Eyes dart constantly. Every doorway looks like a possible escape and a possible death trap. Those who choose to hide retreat into bunkers built beneath buildings, into attics sealed behind false walls, into sewers that stink of waste and decay. These hiding places are cramped, dark, airless. People squeeze together, barely breathing, muscles cramping as hours stretch into days. Children are drugged to keep them silent. Adults bite down on cloth to suppress coughing. The sound of boots overhead becomes unbearable. German units move methodically. Doors are kicked in. Furniture overturned. Floors ripped up. Walls knocked down. Dogs are used to sniff out human scent. Smoke is pumped into basements and bunkers to force people out. When hiding places are discovered, the response is immediate. Grenades tossed inside. Gunfire follows. The screams that erupt are brief, then gone. Those dragged into the streets face rapid selection. The young and strong are separated from the weak. Skilled laborers are pulled aside for temporary reprieve, destined for camps where survival is uncertain at best. The elderly, the sick, children deemed too young to work are herded together. They are often killed on the spot, shot in groups, bodies left where they fall until carts arrive. Fire becomes a primary tool of liquidation. Buildings are set ablaze deliberately, not as collateral damage, but as strategy. Flames force those hiding inside to choose between burning alive or running into gunfire. Smoke fills the ghetto, turning daylight into a choking haze. Ash falls like snow. The smell of burning wood, fabric, and flesh is overwhelming. The city that once lived behind walls becomes an inferno. Resistance flares briefly, desperately. Isolated gunshots, small explosions. Fighters emerge from hiding to cover escapes, to delay advances, to make a final stand. Their ammunition is limited. Their chance is non-existent. But they fight anyway. Every minute gained allows someone else to slip through a sewer opening, climb over a wall, vanish into the chaos. German forces respond with overwhelming violence. Heavy weapons are brought in. Entire buildings are shelled. Streets collapse under rubble. Anyone caught firing is executed immediately, often along with civilians nearby. Collective punishment is enforced without hesitation. The goal is speed, not restraint. For those watching from hiding, the sounds are unbearable. Shouting, gunfire, dogs barking, the crackle of flames. People press hands over mouths, tears streaming silently. They listen as neighbors are discovered, dragged out, killed. Each sound marks a loss. Each silence afterward feels heavier than noise. As liquidation continues, the ghetto physically disappears. Streets are reduced to ruins. Landmarks vanish. Synagogues, schools, homes, shops are destroyed systematically. What was once a densely populated district becomes a landscape of debris and smoke. Maps are updated. The ghetto ceases to exist not only as a community, but as a place. Those who survive the initial actions are forced onto transports. Trains depart continuously, carrying thousands to camps designed for murder. The cars are packed tighter than ever. No water, no air, no explanation. Some die before the trains even leave the station. Others arrive at destinations that will kill them within hours. Executions continue inside the ghetto, even as deportations proceed. There is no attempt to preserve life. Efficiency dictates that those who cannot be transported quickly are eliminated where they stand. Mass graves are dug hastily. Bodies are piled indiscriminately. Names are not recorded. There is no ceremony. The dead are treated as waste. Children suffer the most brutal fate. Many are killed immediately. Others are separated from parents, screaming until voices fail. Some are thrown into trucks like cargo. The sound of children crying becomes one of the defining memories of liquidation, echoing long after the event ends. German officers oversee the process with clipboards and watches. Timelines matter. Delays are unacceptable. The destruction of the ghetto is not an emotional act. It is an operational one. Success is measured in numbers removed, buildings destroyed, time saved. As days pass, fewer people remain. Those still hiding are hunted relentlessly. Rewards are offered for information. Informants emerge, driven by fear, hunger, or the false promise of survival. Trust collapses completely. Anyone could be a threat. Anyone could betray. Some manage to escape. Through sewers. Over walls. With forged papers. With help from those outside willing to risk their lives. These escapes are rare and dangerous. For every person who slips away, dozens are caught or killed. Survival becomes an exception, not a possibility. When the liquidation finally ends, the ghetto is silent. Not the tense silence of waiting, but the dead silence of absence. No footsteps, no voices, no lines at soup kitchens, only ruins. Smoke drifts lazily through shattered streets. Bodies lie where they fell, some already buried under debris, others waiting to be removed. German forces conduct final sweeps, ensuring no one remains alive. They destroy remaining structures, flattening what little stands. The goal is total erasure. The ghetto is to leave no trace, no memory visible to the outside world. A city once filled with life is reduced to rubble and mass graves. Afterward, reports are filed. The operation is declared complete. The ghetto is officially dissolved. The language is cold, precise. It does not mention the screams, the fires, the children, the resistance. It lists numbers, dates, outcomes. The human cost is invisible in ink. For those who escaped, survival brings no relief. They carry the weight of what they witnessed, the guilt of being alive when so many are not, the memory of streets that no longer exist, people who no longer breathe. The ghetto lives on inside them, an internal landscape of loss that cannot be erased. For those deported, the journey leads to camps where liquidation continues in another form. Gas chambers replace bullets. Crematoria replace mass graves. The logic remains the same. Remove. Erase. Forget. The liquidation of the ghettos marks the end of one phase of destruction and the full emergence of another. The cities that were turned into cemeteries are now empty. Their purpose fulfilled. The walls that once confined life now enclose nothing. Yet even in this final erasure, traces remain. Beneath the rubble, jars of diaries. In forests, escapees hiding. In memory, names spoken silently. The ghetto may be gone, but its story is not. As night falls on the ruins, the air grows still. There are no lights, no voices, no movement. Only the faint crackle of smoldering debris and the knowledge that an entire world has been destroyed deliberately, methodically, without mercy. And beyond these ruins, the machinery of genocide continues to operate, faster now, more openly. The ghettos are finished. The camps are waiting. And for those who remain alive, the struggle to survive is about to enter its most lethal stage yet. Chapter 13. After the walls. From ghettos to the machinery of death. The train does not slow when it leaves the ruins behind. It accelerates. Wheels grind against metal tracks, a relentless rhythm that drowns out sobbing, prayers, and the frantic pounding on wooden walls. Inside the freight cars, bodies are pressed together so tightly that falling is impossible. People stand for days without space to sit, without water, without air. The ghetto is gone now, burned and erased, but its logic is not ended. It has simply changed shape. For those deported during liquidation, the journey itself becomes a continuation of punishment. Darkness dominates the cars. A single crack of light slips through warped planks, illuminating faces slick with sweat and fear. The smell is overwhelming. Human waste, vomit, sickness, despair. Children cry until their voices disappear. Adults faint and remain standing, held upright by the press of bodies around them. The dead are not removed. They remain where they fall, trampled unintentionally, because there is nowhere else for them to go. People try to measure time by stops they cannot see. A sudden lurch. A screecher breaks. Silence broken by shouts in German. The doors do not open. Then the train moves again. Hunger gnaws, but thirst is worse. Lips crack. Tongues swell. People trade the last of their possessions for a single sip of water from a shared container. Many do not survive the journey. Their deaths are quiet, unnoticed amid the chaos, absorbed into the collective suffering. When the doors finally slide open, the shock is physical. Light floods in violently, blinding eyes accustomed to darkness. Cold air or searing heat rushes inside, depending on the season. Shouting erupts instantly. Orders barked. Dogs barking. Rifle but striking wood and flesh. People are forced out of the cars, stumbling, falling onto gravel, too weak to stand. The ground smells different here. Smoke hangs in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. This is where the ghetto story dissolves into something even more lethal. Camps stand waiting, already prepared. Barbed wire fences stretch into the distance. Watchtowers loom overhead. The machinery is efficient, practiced, refined by experience. Unlike the ghettos, these places do not pretend to house life. They exist solely to process death. Selections begin immediately. A brief glance determines fate. Left or right, work or death. Parents are separated from children in seconds. The confusion is total. People scream names, reach desperately, only to be beaten back. Some still believe this is temporary, that families will reunite later. Guards encourage this belief with lies, because lies move lines faster. Those deemed unfit for labor are led away quickly. They are told they will shower, that they will rest, that they will be taken care of. The buildings they enter look ordinary enough from the outside. Concrete, brick, chimneys rising above roofs. The truth is revealed only at the end, when there is no longer time to react. For those selected for labor, survival becomes conditional. Shaved heads, striped uniforms, numbers replacing names. The body is transformed into a unit of output. Hunger follows them here too, calculated precisely, just enough to keep bodies moving, not enough to sustain them. Disease spreads again. Violence is constant. Exhaustion becomes permanent. The transition from ghetto to camp is not a break. It is a progression. The ghettos weaken bodies, starve them, condition them to obedience. The camps finish what the ghettos began. Every step has been designed to make resistance harder, survival rarer, death easier. Those who survive the ghettos long enough to reach the camps often feel a strange sense of clarity. The lies fall away. The pretense ends. There is no longer uncertainty about intent. The system is revealed fully, brutally. This knowledge does not make survival easier, but it removes illusion. Some find strength in this clarity. Others collapse under its weight. Not everyone deported from ghettos arrives at extermination camps. Some are sent to labor camps scattered across occupied territories. Quarries, factories, construction sites. Here, death comes slower, but it comes just as surely. Workdays stretch endlessly. Beatings are routine. Accidents are fatal. Those who can no longer work are discarded, sent onward to extermination camps or shot on sight. For those who escape during liquidation, survival outside the ghetto is a different kind of nightmare. The world beyond the walls is not safe. Anti-Semitism persists. Fear dominates. Escapees hide in forests, barns, attics. They depend on the mercy of strangers, many of whom are too afraid to help. Betrayal is common. Informants profit from turning in fugitives. Survival becomes a daily gamble. Partisan groups offer one path forward, but joining them is dangerous. Weapons are scarce. Supplies limited. German reprisals are brutal. Entire villages are burned in response to resistance activity. Escapees must choose between hiding alone or risking collective punishment by joining fighters. Neither option offers security. Those who survive the camps carry the ghettos with them. Hunger does not leave easily. Even when food becomes available, bodies struggle to process it. Disease leaves permanent damage. Trauma manifests in nightmares, silence, sudden panic. The memory of walls, of starvation, of waiting, remains vivid. Liberation, when it comes, feels unreal, fragile, incomplete. For those who do not survive, the ghettos become their final community. Families erased together. Streets emptied permanently. Cultures destroyed in concentrated bursts of violence. The loss is not only numerical. It is civilizational. Languages silenced. Traditions severed. Entire ways of life extinguished. After the war, the sites of former ghettos are often rebuilt quickly. Rubble cleared. New buildings rise. Streets renamed. Life resumes. But beneath the pavement, beneath foundations, the past remains. Mass graves unmarked. Artifacts buried. Bones mixed with soil. The absence is invisible to those who do not know where to look. Survivors return sometimes, searching for familiar landmarks that no longer exist. They walk streets that feel wrong, too open, too quiet. Neighbors are gone. Homes occupied by others. Questions are met with discomfort or hostility. The world has moved on. The ghetto exists only in memory now, and memory is heavy. Testimony becomes essential. Survivors speak, write, record. They describe hunger, walls, lists, deportations. They insist on specificity. Names, dates, places. Against denial and distortion, they hold fast to detail. The truth must be preserved, because the physical evidence has been deliberately erased. The ghettos reveal something fundamental about the Holocaust. They were not improvisations. They were stages, controlled environments designed to isolate, weaken, and prepare populations for extermination. They demonstrate how genocide can unfold gradually, normalized step by step, hidden behind bureaucracy and euphemism. They also reveal the limits of human endurance and the depth of human resilience. Even in places designed to destroy dignity, people taught children, wrote poetry, loved one another, resisted when possible. These acts did not stop the genocide, but they matter. They challenge the narrative of total domination. They insist on humanity in the face of systematic dehumanization. As decades pass, the ghettos risk becoming abstractions, numbers in textbooks, names on plaques. But they were once living cities, filled with voices, arguments, laughter, and daily routines. They were turned into cemeteries not by accident, but by policy. The transition from ghettos to camps marks the moment when containment gives way fully to annihilation. Waiting rooms empty into killing centers. The final illusion of temporary suffering disappears. What remains is the industrial scale of murder. Yet even here, the story is not finished. Survivors carry it forward. Historians reconstruct it. Descendants ask questions. The buried jars are unearthed. The diaries read. The voices heard again. The walls are gone now, but their legacy remains, a warning written into history itself. It shows how easily neighbors can become targets, how laws can become weapons, how indifference can become complicity, and how systems designed to kill do not appear overnight, but are built carefully, step by step, until escape is no longer possible. As the trains continue to roll toward camps and the ghettos fade into ruins, the full shape of the crime becomes clear. This was not chaos. It was order. Not madness, but planning. Not inevitability, but choice. And for those who passed through the ghettos, whether they survived or not, that truth stands as their final testimony. The walls did not simply enclose them. They revealed the world outside for what it was willing to accept. Chapter 14. Survivors, Silence, and the Ruins Left Behind. The war ends, but the noise does not. It only changes shape. Gunfire fades into memory, replaced by silence, so deep it feels unnatural. When the gates finally open and the guards disappear, those who are still alive step out slowly, cautiously, as if expecting the world to collapse the moment they move. For years, movement meant danger. Freedom now feels like a trap. Survivors emerge from camps, forests, hiding places, cellars, and borrowed attics. Their bodies are skeletal, their movements tentative, their eyes alert in ways that never fully soften again. Hunger does not vanish just because food appears. The body has learned starvation too well. Even when bread is placed in trembling hands, many eat slowly, carefully, afraid it will be taken away. Some cannot eat at all. Their bodies reject what they have craved for so long. For those who return to the cities where ghettos once stood, the shock is profound. Streets exist, but they feel wrong. Buildings have been rebuilt or repurposed. Walls that once enclosed entire worlds are gone, leaving open spaces that feel obscene in their emptiness. There are no crowds, no lines, no whispered conversations behind shutters. The absence is overwhelming. Entire neighborhoods have been erased so completely that even memory struggles to anchor itself. Survivors walk through these places searching for landmarks that no longer exist. A corner where a soup kitchen once stood. A doorway where a child was last seen. A courtyard that held mass graves now paved over. They ask questions and are met with shrugs, discomfort, sometimes hostility. New occupants avoid eye contact. Old neighbors claim ignorance. The past is inconvenient. Silence becomes a defense. Homes are occupied by others. Furniture replaced. Names removed from mailboxes. Survivors knock anyway, holding documents, photographs, fragments of proof that they once belonged there. Sometimes they are turned away politely, sometimes angrily, sometimes violently. Returning feels like trespassing in a life that was stolen and redistributed. The physical ruins of the ghettos are cleared quickly after the war. Governments want to rebuild. Cities want to move forward. Rubble is removed. Streets are widened. New housing rises where thousands once starved. Beneath the foundations, bodies remain. Mass graves are rarely marked. The dead lie anonymously beneath playgrounds, parking lots, apartment blocks. Progress is built directly on top of absence. For survivors, this erasure cuts deeply. The ghettos were places of horror, but they were also places of community, resistance, memory. Destroying their traces feels like a second death. Without walls, without ruins, without markers, the story risks dissolving into abstraction. Survivors understand instinctively that forgetting is dangerous. Many survivors are children, though they no longer feel like it. They have no parents to return to, no homes to reclaim. Orphanages fill quickly. Some children are sent abroad, adopted by families who cannot begin to understand what they have endured. Names are changed, languages forgotten. Trauma sinks deep, shaping lives in ways that will surface decades later. Adults face different challenges. They are expected to resume life, to work, to rebuild families, to be grateful for survival. But survival itself feels complicated. Guilt settles heavily. Why did I live when so many did not? Why me? Why now? These questions have no answers, but they persist relentlessly. Many survivors search for relatives desperately. They check lists. They post notices. They ask strangers if they recognize names. The answers are almost always no. Entire family lines have ended. Surnames vanish. Family histories collapse into a single living person carrying generations of memory alone. Testimony becomes both necessity and burden. Survivors feel compelled to speak, to document what happened before silence swallows it. At the same time, speaking reopens wounds that never fully healed. Words feel inadequate. How do you explain hunger that rewired the body? Fear that reshaped the mind? Loss so total it defies language. In the immediate aftermath of the war, many do not want to listen. Courts focus on major perpetrators. Newspapers move on to reconstruction and politics. The suffering of ghetto survivors feels like yesterday's tragedy in a world desperate for normalcy. Silence settles again, this time not imposed by walls, but by indifference. Some survivors choose not to speak at all. They build new lives, new identities, burying the past beneath work, family, routine. The ghettos remain inside them, surfacing in nightmares, sudden panic, obsessive saving of food, fear of closed spaces. Trauma passes quietly from parent to child, shaping families in invisible ways. Others dedicate themselves to remembrance. They write memoirs. They testify in trials. They speak to historians, students, anyone willing to listen. They insist on details, dates, names, places. They understand that specificity is the enemy of denial, that the more precise the memory, the harder it is to erase. Across Europe, monuments are slow to appear. Some cities resist acknowledging what happened within their boundaries. Others erect small plaques, easily overlooked. The scale of destruction makes commemoration feel inadequate. How do you mark a place where an entire city was turned into a cemetery? In many former ghetto locations, nothing indicates what once stood there. Tourists pass unaware. Locals go about daily routines. Only those who know where to look feel the weight beneath their feet. Memory becomes an underground presence, like the jars of diaries buried during the war, waiting to be uncovered. The legal aftermath brings little closure. Many perpetrators evade justice. Some reintegrate into society quietly. Survivors encounter former guards, collaborators, administrators living ordinary lives. The injustice is staggering. Accountability feels incomplete, compromised, delayed. The world's response feels insufficient compared to the scale of the crime. Yet slowly, painfully, the record grows. Historians reconstruct ghetto life using documents, testimonies, buried writings. The story becomes clearer, more detailed, harder to deny. The ghettos are recognized not as incidental features of war, but as central mechanisms of genocide, places where destruction was normalized, bureaucratized, and hidden in plain sight. For survivors, this recognition matters. It validates experiences long dismissed or minimized. It acknowledges that what happened was not chaos, but design, not inevitability, but policy. The ghettos are understood as laboratories of suffering, testing grounds for extermination. Memory also evolves across generations. Children and grandchildren of survivors inherit stories, fragments, silences. They grow up with an awareness that absence shapes their lives. They visit former ghetto sites. They read diaries. They ask questions that parents struggled to answer. In doing so, they extend memory beyond those who lived it. The ruins left behind are not only physical, they are cultural. Entire communities that once contributed richly to art, language, commerce, and thought are gone. The ghettos were not isolated tragedies. They were the concentrated destruction of living cultures. Their absence impoverishes the world long after the last wall falls. As decades pass, denial and distortion emerge. Numbers are questioned. Intent is minimized. Responsibility is blurred. Survivors recognize these patterns immediately. They have seen how lies begin small and grow powerful when unchallenged. Remembering the ghettos becomes an act of vigilance. The survivors understand something others may not, that the ghettos were not inevitable. They were created deliberately, step by step, through choices made by ordinary people, enforced by laws, normalized by silence. The ruins left behind are warnings, not relics. In quiet moments, survivors return to memory not as testimony, but as mourning. They remember specific faces, voices, gestures, a neighbor who shared bread, a child who smuggled food, a teacher who kept teaching until there was no strength left. These memories are intimate, personal, irreplaceable. They resist being reduced to statistics. As the last survivors age, urgency grows. Time is thinning the living link to the ghettos. Diaries and recordings take on greater weight. Education becomes critical. The responsibility of memory shifts gradually from those who endure to those who learn. Standing in a rebuilt city where a ghetto once stood, it is easy to miss the past entirely. Cars pass. Shops open. Children play. Life continues. That continuation is not wrong, but it is incomplete without remembrance. The ruins left behind are not always visible. They exist in gaps in family trees, in unanswered questions, in the quiet anxiety that travels through generations. They exist in the knowledge that cities once designed to kill were accepted, tolerated, normalized. Survivors carry these ruins within them, not as symbols, but as lived reality. Their survival is not a triumph over suffering. It is a testament to endurance in a world that failed them. As the chapter of immediate aftermath closes, one truth remains undeniable. The ghettos did not end when the walls fell. They ended when the last memory of them fades. And as long as someone remembers, speaks, and insists on truth, the cemeteries that were once cities will not be completely silent. Chapter 15: Cities Turned into Cemeteries. Memory, Warning, and What Remains. Long after the last train has departed and the last wall has fallen, the silence remains. It settles over streets rebuilt too quickly, over foundations poured on top of mass graves, over cities that have learned to function without the people who once defined them. This silence is not peaceful. It is heavy. It carries the weight of absence, the echo of voices that were never meant to disappear. The ghettos no longer exist as places, but they persist as patterns, as methods, as lessons written into history with a precision that should terrify anyone willing to look closely. They were not spontaneous outbreaks of cruelty. They were designed systems, constructed step by step, normalized slowly, and accepted widely. They show how an entire population can be isolated, stripped of rights, starved, and erased while the world continues to move just outside the walls. What remains of the ghettos today is often invisible. A widened road, a new apartment block, a public park where children play. Beneath these ordinary surfaces lie layers of suffering compacted into the earth. Bones mixed with soil, diaries sealed in jars, names spoken for the last time in whispers. The absence is so complete that it requires effort to remember that anything was ever there at all. Memory survives unevenly. In some places, plaques mark former ghetto boundaries. Names are etched into stone. Dates are recorded. In others, nothing indicates that tens of thousands lived, starved, resisted, and died there. Forgetting is easier when there is nothing to see. The ghettos teach that erasure does not end with death. It continues through neglect. The story of the ghettos forces an uncomfortable confrontation with complicity. Not only the complicity of those who designed and enforced the system, but the complicity of those who watched it unfold and did nothing. The walls were built in full view of surrounding neighborhoods. The starvation was visible. The deportations were audible. Trains passed through stations used by everyone else. Knowledge was fragmented, but it was not absent. The ghettos depended on this fragmentation, on people knowing just enough to feel uneasy, but not enough to feel responsible. They depended on routine, on bureaucracy, on euphemism, on the idea that what was happening was temporary, necessary, regrettable, but unavoidable. These justifications are familiar. They appear wherever injustice seeks legitimacy. What the ghettos ultimately reveal is how quickly a city can be transformed into a cemetery without ever being officially declared one. No tombstones were required, no mass announcements. Death accumulated quietly, through policy, through neglect, through deliberate deprivation. People died in rooms they once called home, on streets they once walked freely, in neighborhoods that still existed physically even as the life within them was extinguished. The victims of the ghettos were not anonymous to one another. They knew names, faces, habits. They argued, loved, resented, forgave. Their lives were complex, ordinary, and human. Reducing them to numbers is part of the violence done to them. Remembering them as individuals resists that reduction. Survivors carry this knowledge into the world that followed, often without the language to explain it. They live with an awareness that structures matter, that laws can kill, that waiting for clarity can be fatal, that the worst crimes are often committed not in moments of frenzy, but in long stretches of administration. The ghettos also exposed the fragility of moral norms. Neighbors became bystanders. Bystanders became beneficiaries. The removal of one group created opportunities for others. Homes changed hands. Businesses reopened under new ownership. Life continued, materially improved for some, while catastrophe unfolded for others. This too is part of the legacy. Education about the ghettos is not merely about honoring the past. It is about recognizing patterns in the present. Segregation framed as safety. Deprivation justified as necessity. Groups defined as problems rather than people. Bureaucratic language used to obscure harm. These are not relics of history. They are tools that reappear whenever societies allow fear to override empathy. The ghettos demonstrate how quickly rights can be revoked when identity is turned into a liability. Citizenship removed. Movement restricted. Access to food controlled. Speech monitored. Existence conditioned on compliance. None of these measures required mass violence at first. They required laws, paperwork, enforcement, and silence. Resistance, when it came, was never guaranteed to succeed. It rarely did, but it mattered. It mattered because it asserted agency in a system designed to deny it. It mattered because it preserved dignity in conditions meant to annihilate it. It mattered because it left a record that submission was not universal. Cultural resistance mattered too. Songs sung in whispers. Lessons taught in secret. Words buried for the future. These acts did not save lives in the immediate sense, but they saved meaning. They ensured that when the walls fell, something of the human world they enclosed would remain accessible. The ghettos challenged the idea that survival is the only measure of success. Many who died resisted. Many who lived were broken in ways that survival did not heal. The legacy of the ghettos is not a simple story of death versus life. It is a story of what happens to societies when systems are allowed to redefine humanity itself. For descendants of ghetto victims, the past is not distant. It is present in gaps, in unanswered questions, in the absence of grandparents, in traditions interrupted mid-sentence. The ghettos created silences that echo across generations. Memory becomes an inheritance, heavy but necessary. Commemoration struggles with scale. How do you memorialize a city that became a cemetery? How do you mark a place where every street corner witnessed suffering? Monuments help, but they cannot replace understanding. True remembrance requires engagement with complexity, with discomfort, with the recognition that ordinary structures enabled extraordinary crimes. The ghettos also demand vigilance against simplification. They were not all the same. Conditions varied. Responses differed. Some places saw more resistance, others less. Some councils resisted subtly, others failed tragically. These differences matter. They remind us that history is shaped by choices, even under extreme constraint. What unites all ghettos, however, is intent. They were created to isolate, weaken, and prepare populations for destruction. Whether death came through starvation, disease, execution, or deportation, the outcome was built into the design. Understanding this intent is essential to understanding genocide itself. The phrase, "never again," often follows discussions of the Holocaust, but the ghettos complicate that promise. They show that atrocities do not begin with gas chambers. They begin with exclusion, with rhetoric, with laws, with walls justified as temporary measures. Preventing future atrocities requires recognizing these early stages and refusing to accept them. Memory alone is not enough if it becomes ritual without reflection. The ghettos ask something more demanding. They ask for attention to systems, to language, to the ways power operates quietly. They ask whether we notice when certain lives are treated as expendable, when suffering is managed rather than prevented. Standing in a modern city built atop a former ghetto, it is possible to feel nothing at all. That numbness is dangerous. It is the same numbness that allowed ghettos to exist in the first place. Remembering requires effort precisely because forgetting is comfortable. The final legacy of the ghettos is not only warning, but responsibility. Responsibility to preserve testimony, to challenge denial, to teach history honestly, without euphemism, to recognize that human rights are not self-sustaining. They depend on constant defense. The cities that became cemeteries cannot speak for themselves. Their voices were buried, burned, scattered. What remains are fragments, records, memories carried by those who survived and those who listened. The responsibility now belongs to those who inherit this history. As time moves forward and the last survivors fade, the ghettos risk becoming distant abstractions. Dates on timelines. Case studies in textbooks. This is the final danger. When history loses its immediacy, its lessons lose urgency. But the ghettos were real places, filled with real people whose lives mattered. They were turned into cemeteries not by fate, but by choice. Remembering them is not an act of nostalgia. It is an act of resistance against the conditions that made them possible. The walls are gone. The streets are rebuilt. The trains no longer carry their cargo of death. But the patterns remain, waiting to be recognized or ignored. The ghettos ask whether we have learned to see them. In the end, what remains is a simple, unsettling truth. Cities do not become cemeteries overnight. They become cemeteries when humanity is divided, when suffering is normalized, and when silence is chosen over action. The ghettos stand as a permanent warning of how easily that choice can be made, and how devastating its consequences can be. As this story closes, the silence returns, but it does not have to be empty. It can be filled with remembrance, with vigilance, with refusal. The cities turned into cemeteries cannot be restored, but the future can still be shaped by what we choose to remember and what we refuse to accept ever again.